Welcome to episode 16 of the Coast AFL Podcast with Nick and Blaze. This week, there's a lot of teams that were on losing streaks that are now on the winners list, and that's exactly what we're going to be talking about. The Spoon Bowl is a big one. Richmond beating Adelaide in Adelaide, and as we're doing the podcast this week, the King's birthday game is on, so you'll be able to keep an eye on that as we continue to discuss it. So let's jump right in. How are you doing, Mr. Sarek?
Not too bad, not too bad. Yeah, just a pretty standard weekend. Actually watched a bit of the other sport, bit of the NBA this morning. Finished off my notes. And yeah, keen to get into this game. Well, casting a few glances at this game going on. So far it's just a bit of feeling. Both teams had a bit of possession.
Mm-hmm.
Melbourne's getting dominance but kicking behinds, while Collingwood had a few early. So yeah, we'll keep you updated as that goes. It'll be just emotional reactions. Don't think there'll be too many deep analysis, but I've got a few good points of contentions for a few teams we'll be talking about today. So glad to bring it to you.
Yeah, if the game wraps up as we run through the rest of the teams this week, we'll probably just go through some stats and see what jumps out at us. But otherwise, yeah, just keep an eye. Yeah. We'll just keep an eye on the game as we keep going. So, you want to jump straight into it this week?
Well, I'm not jumping.
No,
I'm jumping. Want me to go first.
I'm jumping.
You're keen.
I got the Thursday night game because we got to win, baby.
A win.
I'm sad I didn't actually get to watch any of it, well, at least live. I was in the middle of a TV studio audience, and I wasn't allowed to have my phone on me. So, but it was good.
Probably good for the taping.
Good for the taping. Bad for me as a Richmond supporter because I want to see a win. I only got to see one. I'm missing this one. But no, it was good to head over to the Adelaide Oval and for the boys to get a win on enemy turf, and then get to come home this week for a Sunday afternoon thriller. Actually, because Hawthorn are also in good form, and it's going to be Dustin Martin's 300th.
Exactly. So, both teams got some really big things to play for. But we'll cover this thing first.
Hawthorn could possibly break out into finals after a pretty interesting start of the season. Something no one was really expecting of them. And then for Richmond, this
might be the start of Richmond's climb up.
No, we're definitely not playing definitely not playing finals this season. But
it's a good effort.
We want to be able to celebrate one of the kings of the game. And we're going to try and do that with a win. But that's
Big Dusty.
That's a next week conversation. So this week, a valiant Richmond fight to get their second win of the season over the wavering Crows. As a lot of people have noticed, like the Crows, they've been in a really awkward position this season. They're not exactly where they wanted to be after how they finished off last season. Considering they were really, really in form and in a really, really good shape last season. But yeah, they've just been hit on the injury front. Their midfield is very 50-50 a lot of the time. They have some standouts. Like every week, they usually have some pretty good standouts. This week, they do have also a couple standouts, which I'll talk about in a minute. But yeah, they didn't really have much of a forward line this week. And I think it really impacted part of their transition game as well, especially going through midfield to forward.
No, it's sorry.
It's I don't know. We'll touch a little bit more on where Adelaide is at in a moment, but as you do your thing, I'm going to talk about the Tigers. Tim Taranto, good to have him back. So good to have him back. We've desperately been despite all the efforts that we've shown over the past couple of weeks in our midfield, we've needed him massively. He's been a really key part as to how our transition game plays to the midfield.
Yeah, and it was massive. Like, I think Richmond overall pretty much dominated in terms of impactful midfield generation. I mean, it wasn't like a thrashing in the clearances or anything, but a lot of what the Crows had to do was stuff in close quarters and congested. While it wasn't like it was as clean as you would expect from Richmond. You know, there was a few errors and turnovers, but overall, I think it was a much more impressive performance there. Also, sorry about earlier. I started coughing. I put myself on mute, which is why I didn't respond for a while. But
you're very good.
Yeah,
I spotted that. So yeah, he finished with 26 touches, 14 contested possessions, 5 inside 50s, 6 clearances, 8 tackles, and 28 pressure acts. Pretty much a really strong on-ball game, which is what we require from him, and it was very very much needed because like some of our bigger body players have gone through too many injuries to be able to really play that kind of style at this current point in time. Like Jack Graham, for an example, like because of his shoulder injuries, he just hasn't been able to be that strong on baller. Dion Prestia as well. Like whilst he still has great games, it's his legs that give him the issues and not core body strength.
Yeah, exactly. It just makes it harder to run out.
Which allows like a younger strong midfielder like Ryan Mansell to come into the game. He finished with only 10 touches, but that's okay because he had 4 of them were contested possessions, 6 inside 50s, 8 tackles, 28 pressure acts, and a 2-1 scoreline. So whilst he's not a hard on-baller, he's an outside on-baller who still has a lot of strong ball presence, but just doesn't get the touches for it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the other one too, in terms of pinch hitting, this one's a bit more inside, but Thompson Dow as well.
He's had
I thought he was pretty
huge season.
like the last month, I would say, especially. He's been he sort of lifted after Richmond had that sort of fade out where they just weren't getting hands on anything. So
he's certainly having a much better season than his brother at St Kilda.
yeah, no, that's for sure. It is weird how Thompson Dow was very mid rounds, wasn't he? And as I said, he's a little be a better prospect. It's a bit hard to tell, and you always say for the other Dow's case, he might go a bit higher to his actual talent scouting, but yeah, we'll see about that. But for Richmond, we're going to focus on for now, especially after a win, can't be talking about too many other clubs. No,
absolutely. I've got to try and pump us up as much as I can.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, I said it was a really good game for him. And just in general,
it was good to see Kaczynski actually have a forward impact. I know in the VFL they had to be played in defense for a little bit because we just didn't have numbers in both the VFL and the AFL. But it was good for him to see him actually have a forward impact on the game.
Yeah, and while it was only 1 goal, you also got to remember he did have a probable. We'll give him it, the set shot taken away from.
Oh yeah, because
who was it? It was Cumberland.
Yeah, it was Cumberland.
Yeah, while he had a good game goal scoring, that was probably one of the dumber moves, especially with a 1-win team.
And credit to Cumberland and the fact that he did get 3 goals, but he is way too hot-headed.
Yeah, that was just not time or place sort of thing. It's just. I'm glad that they were able to hold off.
Yeah, I want to shout out Noah Bolter as well. Yeah, our predominant swingman. He's been put back in defense where we've desperately needed him. He finished with 20 touches at 90% efficiency, 7 intercept possessions, 12 marks, and 2 tackles. I also want to shout out Samson Ryan, my boy, my personal goat on our team. He's definitely getting a lot more solid experience as a ruck forward, and I really liked what I saw from the replay of his performance. He definitely needs that more experience and that more time commitment, but he's definitely getting there.
And on the flip side, you got to say it was a bit of a weird. Adelaide, of course, were unlucky. They dropped Riley O'Brien before the match because I thought they weren't getting enough out of him around the ground, probably. And also his step. He's a bulk hit out, but he's not that. He's not the directest tap ruckman going around. But he is a hard worker. He does a lot of bulk stuff. And when you saw Kieran Strawn, even before he got injured, it didn't quite seem like he had the capacity to keep up, especially with someone like Toby Nankervis.
Mhm.
And then once he went down, Chris Burgess and Ball Ace, that's just, it's almost disrespectful, to
Yeah.
Toby. Like, what? I mean, yeah, as I
Hey,
said, it was unlucky
hey,
that Geelong
Sean
got
Grigg
down.
was a premiership ruckman. The short
Yeah,
men
I
can do it.
know. Honestly, I think Adelaide Crows would have probably paid to get Sean Grigg out of the stands with that, because they got towed up in the second half.
I call Sean
Like,
Grigg. I shall call Sean Grigg a short man. He's taller than me. Still.
yeah. Oh, man, I hate to say it, Blazy, but it's not too hard. We're about the same.
Yeah, I know.
Just that middling 174.
Yeah.
Like, there's only been few AFL players that have been our height. I think
Ca-
there's still some going
Caleb
around.
Daniel I think, is our closest.
Yeah, Caleb Daniels is our height. Jakey Need used to. Oh, I was actually taller than him, 170. Um, just going back a bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, so. But
Speaking
yeah, back
of
on Richmond.
no. I'm actually going to move on to Adelaide because speaking of Nankervis, I want to
Yeah.
talk about Luke Nankervis.
This
He
is
had a
really good,
huge
yeah.
game off halfback. He finished with
Mm.
28 touches at 78.6% efficiency, 10 contested possessions, 10 intercept possessions, 11 marks, and 3 inside 50s. I thought he was like a really, really good runner, a good carrier of the ball for the Crows, and
Yeah.
managed to at least try and give him a lot more forward pressure in terms of like breaking out of their backline.
Yeah, exactly. Which, to be honest, they didn't really do for much of the match. Richmond were actually very good at least making it a bit harder. Like, to be fair, they did score a bit off halfback. They were just very inaccurate.
Mm.
But as I said, it was a bit. Oh, what's his name or nothing? Scholl.
Ah,
It was
yeah.
a bit Scholl or nothing on the wing. They didn't quite have their outside game set up as evenly as Richmond were able to do. As you mentioned, Mansell before, came in McIntosh.
Hugo Ralph Smith,
Especially very
also very
early
good on the
on. He was,
wing.
yeah, he had a quiet game, but like I said, they had enough performance to where that didn't matter. But yeah, so
In the absence,
yeah, just to be outclassed.
yeah, pretty much. In the absence,
Overall midfield, yeah.
yeah, in the absence of Matt Crouch, I thought Rory Laird had a really standout game for a veteran. He finished with 28 touches, 11 contested possessions, 2 inside 50s, 7 clearances, 5 tackles, and 19 pressure acts. Which, he's been one of the more quieter veterans over the course of this season,
Yeah,
but I
for
think
sure.
I think he really stood up with Crouch's absence.
Yeah, it's sort of a needed move now. Like, there's been a lot of people calling him to play off halfback, but I think for now, just that stability, he's got to play in the guts. Even if you manage him, swap him between some of your other midfielders. Someone that have been pumping up a bit more is Sam Berry.
Mm-hmm.
He just had an okay game, but you're looking to see him with a bit more midfield time, especially since Rochelle has been possibly banned from the midfield forevermore.
Yeah, he's been having
a
some
good match by him,
situations.
but yeah, as I said, it was commented last week that he wasn't quite sure why he wasn't getting as much midfield time. Honestly, I think he's just trying to find himself a bit this year. So I can understand where that comment's coming from. Obviously, as a coach, you probably prefer him not to say that, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see. You want him to have a big back half of the year, and as I said, maybe he'll just get introduced in the mix. Maybe he'll just stay in forward line because as I said, he has been a bit better over the last few weeks. But yeah, they really need that spark because Crows are now the bottom 4. That's just the reality of it. Which is, where they were a couple of years ago. And it's not guaranteed that they'll find their way out of it. Personally, I think they probably could. But, they need to get a few more metrics going their way. As I said, a lot of it's still got to do with the forward line and the midfield. It has been better, than the start of the season still. But, and this is no disrespect to Richmond, but at home when you're getting outclassed like that, it's still a problem.
Yeah.
Because I thought Richmond were going to try their hardest. They might cause a few headaches. But you know what I mean? It's just like, again, like when you consider Richmond, like they're still struggling. Like you can see with some of their possession chains, like they're not getting everything out that they want to do per match.
Correct.
They're giving other teams options, but the Crows just look so anemic the other way. And cumulatively, Richmond just, despite, still being not the best kicking percentage team, despite having, a defense that's been knocked down, they kept last year's prolific scoring team to 71 points. It's, it's just a bit worrying, I would say. As I said, I can understand why some of the coach talk is starting to come up about. Obviously, it's a bit harsh when they overperformed so much last year, but structurally, there's just not a lot going right this year. But I will say, Darcy Fogarty finding some form is probably the one, I won't say shining light, but upside for the rest of their season.
Yeah,
especially when they
had a
should
really
get
good game.
Thilthorpe. Yeah, especially when Thilthorpe should have come back in, I think, 2 or 3 weeks.
I think he's back sometime after the bye. So it'll be like in a couple of weeks,
Yeah.
Which is good. It's something good for them to look forward to.
Exactly.
I want to give a brief shout out to Kieran Strawn, Billy Dowling, and James Ball-Ace for kicking their first AFL career goals. Even though James Ball-Ace has been in defence for the entire time he's been at Adelaide.
Yeah, it was an interesting move forward. It was quite good, actually, but it's just, it's taken out one of their best defenders as well, so...
And then just to wrap this up, a couple of injuries. Kieran Strawn did a groin injury. I don't think it was anything too bad. Like maybe he'll only miss like a handful of games. And then Dion Prestia with calf tightness. Thankfully, not his hamstrings. Thank God.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think he said, according to Ooze, like he was just got a little bit of a knock and he was already kind of a bit sore on it, so they just kind of pulled him out.
Yeah.
Just to be safe. But we have a big break now. I think from this game was played Thursday, and then our game against Hawthorns on Sunday, so it's like a 12-day break, something like that. So he'll be fine.
Yeah,
he'll play.
It's pretty crazy. Like we're gonna talk about it in another match. That's coming up a bit later, but scheduling's weird this year.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm glad that Richmond got the win because that's sort of hard when you look at it. Especially, I don't know who they're versing afterwards, but
I think we've got the bye after Hawthorn because we don't have the bye yet.
Okay, sorry, yeah, I misunderstood that. Yeah, you got Hawthorn next week, but as I said, normally, longer turnarounds against teams with shorter turnarounds is the bigger indication of poorer performances. As I said, a lot said about the bye and all that, and while it does matter, as I said, it's only if you're versing a team that's played the week before. Because it's AFL, it takes a huge toll on your body. You don't necessarily warm down, but it definitely does affect you a bit.
Yeah, I agree. All right, you've got Friday night's game. Shall we run through it?
Yeah, and I was talking about how a team couldn't throw back to 2023. Now for a team that sort of did, the Brisbane Lions, I thought absolutely beat up on the Bulldogs. They dominated the forward half territory battle, and they've got some really nice looks against the Dogs, who were good once they moved the ball forward, the Doggies, but that just did not happen at all. Brisbane just, again, they defended by possessing. One thing that I mentioned, in the preseason things, how good they were at doing that. They were absolutely fantastic. I thought a nice little start to the game. They're still probably really good friends, but split up now. Adam Treloar, Josh Trunkley, kicked the first goals for their respective teams. One of the best bromances in the league when they were both at the Dogs. But yeah, the Lions would dominate the inside 50 count and clearances early. Hipwood and Jamara Uga-Hagan kicked a couple of early for each and looked hot. But yeah, the Lions probably looked to be more ominous then, but they just couldn't convert at all.
Mm-hmm.
And then after quarter time, it was pretty much a landslide. Bullied the Dogs out the corridor. Neil and the Big O, Oscar McInerney, would dominate. Jared Berry forced the Bont to play forward early. Obviously, the Bont was denied inside in the tag.
Mm-hmm.
He and Liberatore, who came back,
Oh yeah,
played a
Libba
good
was
game,
back this week.
but yeah, so he was trying to get Bont free, but was just giving away too many free kicks. Give it a bit to the rust. And then for the one best thing to happen to the Bulldogs, Bont just was like, I'm getting tagged. I'll just go forward, kick 3 goals, just bomb things, you know? It's like, how do you defend against that for a whole game? Like, he is, like, as I said, they were showing the, in the Sydney games, number 1 and number 2 in terms of, AFL rated players.
Mm-hmm.
And the Bont has just overtaken Heaney as the number 1 player in the league.
Interesting.
I would believe it. As I said, it was just so good. But, apart from that, the Bulldogs tried in vain to defend the wealth of entries that the Lions would get. But yeah, they would just beat up in the inside 50 count. They would lose it 45-64.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, 64, I think, is the most inside 50s for a team this week. And they would lose 10-11, 71 to 17-12, 114. You probably wouldn't have any surprise to who the couple of the best performers of the nights were. One...
Does it happen to be 2023 Brownlow medalist Lachie Neale?
Yeah, pretty much. And it's pretty much a toss-up whether you want to give it to him or Eric Hipwood.
Hipwood in 5 goals is pretty impressive.
6 goals.
Oh, sorry, 6 goals. Yeah, considering his performance just throughout this season, he's been pretty under par.
Yeah.
It's actually good to see him have a massive impact on a game that they needed to win.
Yeah, and it was another one where something that he hasn't been as good is, especially compared to Joe Danaher, 7 marks inside 50 that match.
Mm-hmm.
Led the night, of course. Also a couple of tackles inside 50. And he took unsupported Keith to town. I say unsupported because I'll go a bit into further how I think the Bulldogs sort of, not were poor defensively, but definitely didn't help each other despite being under siege. But we'll go for individual players first. Neil, 38 possessions. So, also pretty good there for possible best on ground. 14 contested, 84% efficiency. Leg clearances with 10. 6 score involvals, I think 2 behinds as well.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, especially in the second quarter when, they started to kick away. Absolutely huge.
He's probably going to get the 3 Brownlow votes out of this one.
Oh, I would imagine. It doesn't matter who. They were both brilliant performances. But yeah, 1 and 2 is pretty much locked up. In terms of other good Brisbane performers, Harris Andrews, he didn't have as much work to do, but still generated a lot. 9 intercepts, 5 intercept marks specifically, and he kept Lobb very quiet. Lobb was then subbed off to Karmas.
Mm-hmm.
He was playing forward because reasons and was subbed because reasons. Yeah, just Bulldogs things. So they didn't have any goals and very limited disposals, so probably give him the best defender of the night too. Rayner, Lohman, Bailey up forward.
Mm-hmm.
Great pressure, scoring setup. They're all great. None of them had standout goal scoring performances, but they contributed a lot of score involvements, kept them pretty ruthless and pretty accurate.
Mm-hmm.
And Zorko off halfback. Really great game. 600 meters gained, 87% efficiency. And yeah, as I said, it was night and day in terms of transition from the back half between the two sides. For the Dogs, just quickly, Treloar, definitely the most consistent performer of the night.
He's
10
definitely
score involvement.
he's had a really good month. Like, just
Yeah,
the stretch of
exactly.
games he's had recently has been really, really good.
Yeah. That actually surprised me. He was game high in score involvements with 10.
Oh, yeah.
5 clearances, 30 possessions. Bonzempelli, he might get, despite how bad the Dogs looked, he might even sneak a vote. He snuck up forward, 3 goals, 2 marks inside 50, 9 score involvements, 19 possessions, and, just kept Jones and Keith with a lot to do down back.
I wouldn't be
Yeah, and
surprised,
Jones...
honestly, if Bont would get 2 votes and then Hipwood would get 1, just because it'd be like one of his first times actually going to a Brownlow.
Maybe. As I said, it's just Bontempelli was kept quiet the first half, first quarter. I don't even mean first half, but as I said, it just didn't matter. Like, he's just so, as I said, for someone who can be like Dustin Martin in terms of,
Just raw
he can
body
play that
strength
like
and physicality.
it's like not only physical, but I'd say efficiency. Like possessions that lead to score involvements. Is just ridiculously high. And when he can get that and also be just a contested possession getter, freak in the middle, it's like, which Bont do you want? Because you're going to get either. Like, you tag him and he just decides to be other Bont,
Yeah.
It's not even necessarily pre-planned. So, as I said, the only other shout out for the Dogs I really want to shout out, I thought he had a really hard night out at it. As in he went in hard at the contest. Riley Garcia, 11 contested possessions, equaled the Dogs' best. 10 ground ball gets, not high. 8 score involvements, including a goal of his own. And, as I said...
Very good for a young kid.
They got... Yeah, and especially since the Dogs were getting bullied out of the middle, I thought to at least put the fight while being so young, is very promising, As you know me, I am very fond of all the Rileys that play for the Bulldogs.
You are? There are 3 of them, in fact.
Yeah. And yeah, Garcia just was, really solid. But yeah, I will say it again, like a few other games where the Dogs been bad, they just looked like a bunch of scrambled pieces in general play. Like, they won the turnover count in this match, but lost the scores off turnovers 10-5 to 5-6. And they did not get many deep shots at all, which to me suggests that when they did get the turnovers, especially off defensive half, which they barely scored at all, they just couldn't get good movement on the wings. In terms of Brisbane, Reville and McCluggage absolutely dominated Daniels and McNeil being the main 2 wingers. Obviously, there's always people that come and go in there. In terms of other things, O'Donnell moved from back to forward in the second, and Karmas came on late. But all night, Brisbane needed a spare man in defence because they were getting absolutely killed in the contests. But, as I said, you can't put it all on that because they were also very lackadaisical defending from transition. So
very true.
When you got, the ball coming in very fast and, you're pretty much locked into one-on-one contests, it's almost an impossible task to defend, especially when you do have the quality players that the Brisbane Lions have. And yeah, it just looked very ugly. They weren't doing themselves any favours not pre-game, but you know what I mean? Like, structurally, even though, as I said, I think Keith and Liam Jones were very trying. But there wasn't that much they can do. Like, I think Jones even still had, 12 intercepts, 7 intercept marks.
Yeah.
So it's not like he was kept out of the game. It was just too many. And honestly, for the Bulldogs, I reckon they're just a group of 15 very talented players. And then you just have a very wild performance. And it's aging players like McRae, Daniels, DeRay, and although he didn't play this week, Harms. And then, as I said, like, they're setting the kids up in varying positions and sort of, I think, swinging them so up and down I think it just hurts their development because they don't really have too many of their young kids staying week in, week out, in the position. Look, I get that Karmas could have been a management thing, but as I said, like that was just so baffling to me.
Mm-hmm.
As I said, players like O'Donnell having to move back and forward. What's the other one? Freya, who I've, pretty much liked. But it's been a bit, Lockie McNeil's another one.
Mm-hmm.
He was one of the people that didn't really have a very good game. Not the worst on the wing. Vandermeer had very little impact. Gallagher was a bit inside, but yeah, as I said, it was just. Oh yeah, that's right. Gallagher was. I think he was tagging Neil at some point,
Oh yeah.
and he just got absolutely bodied. Like he just. It was just no. So failed tag and then didn't have too much impact. As I said, just a young kid, but yeah, as I said, there's just a lot of plans going awry for the Bulldogs at the moment. And, it's, and I'm not sure. I might bring the injury up early because it's not that too many injuries we're talking about. But Alex Keith, he is going to miss up to 6 weeks of football from his clash with Hipwood early on in the game.
Mm-hmm.
And what did I say? I can't even remember now.
You mentioned it earlier.
Ryan Gardner
That's
is
right.
out with a list. So yeah, that's a couple of defenders, that are going to have to. They're going to have to find something in defense because they've been really bad over the last 5 weeks.
Yeah.
One of the worst defensive teams in the league in certain metrics, and it's not exactly an easy schedule coming up for them. But to go back to Brisbane again, yeah, it was pretty much. They've had metrics this season which have looked really good, but they haven't exactly had it against like really solid opposition.
Mm-hmm.
I would say the game against Carlton and Melbourne, they sorted it. More specifically, Carlton, that was just a really good comeback by them. But this game, like this was it. This was them playing nearly at their best,
Mm-hmm.
and especially away from home, it keeps them in touching distance to the top 8, especially after that bad loss against Hawthorn. I still don't quite think they'll make the top 8, but I also thought that this game might have been a loss for them. You get a bit demoralized, but at least for Fagan and the men, they bounced back at least.
Yeah, they definitely
whereas,
needed.
as I said,
This was definitely a game that they needed to win in terms of balancing their
yeah,
season.
and it's like not even. Yeah, I don't want to go too much. You get back again to the Bulldogs, but while they stay in between punching distance from a lot, yeah, it just doesn't look good for them in terms of optics. It's going to take quite a change, and they've been trying so hard to change things up, get things going, but no matter whether they win or lose, they just don't seem to quite have it together. And it's what we've seen. Like they've had some very convincing wins. They've had some pretty abysmal losses, and like I highlighted, movement just continues to be the one thing that's holding them back from being a real threat.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Especially if now they're going to lose some of that backline, it's going to be a lot harder for them to try and stop it, like teams from scoring against them just in general.
Yeah, exactly. And, as I said, and it's sort of hard because, they give up a lot of inside 50s too. So, it's sort of hard because they can never get it quiet because they get people who are good on the halfback, like Bailey Williams, and, people that I've said before. What's his name? Anyway, and then they move him onto the wing, and then their halfback movement looks terrible. So it's just like, where do you position players to get the most out of them? And yeah, the Bulldogs just haven't found that at the moment. And they need to do a bit of soul searching because, yeah, as I said, it doesn't look good.
Yeah, it's going to take them a bit of time before they try and find any sort of proper cohesiveness, especially in that back line.
Yeah, it's just, the forward line, they generate enough. And especially like in terms of forward half pressure, retention rate,
Mhm.
you know, above average. And, it's just that end is so bad that it just doesn't matter. It's almost like the opposite of
Yeah,
the Saints
yeah,
ball
no,
movement. But,
pretty much.
as I said, it's just loose defense, stuck together with a pretty great offense versus a tight knit defense with no offensive movement. So, yeah, but we'll talk about them a bit later. Yeah, as I said, I think I'll for any Doggies fans listening, I think I'll wrap up the that game right now. So, should we move to Saturday's game?
Yeah, and I've got the first one being Hawthorn and GWS down in Tassie. A pretty interesting game,
Mm,
to be honest, because, well,
yes.
GWS were coming off of the bye, but they're still one of the best informed teams in the competition at this point in time, right? Like, they've got some really good pieces. Like, their entire team is full of really good pieces. They're
Yeah.
very consistent in just the way that they've played. But Hawthorn, sorry, there was a bug. I had to kill it. But
It's all good.
Hawthorn are underdogs right now. Like everyone seems to
Mm,
kind of not really be like, I feel like rating them as properly as they should, because they look really really good. Sam Mitchell has done something, not
mm.
sure what. Maybe he listened to the podcast and listened to our criticisms. But we,
Yeah.
as we've been saying with these past couple of wins, Hawthorn is showing us what we've been wanting to see, and I'm very, very impressed with their
Mm,
season so far. The fact that they're only one game outside of the eight is actually crazy,
mm.
considering they started bottom
And
four for the first quarter of the season.
and especially with that percentage too, because as bad as it is, it's really just the first few games when they didn't quite have that identity together.
Mm.
Like it, like I won't say it's as bad because I think GWS were a bit better than like the start of Hawthorn were this year. Talking about 2023 GWS where they were bottom four before going on their run.
Oh yeah, very true.
Um, but as I said, Hawthorn just they look like a team cohesive, as we've mentioned, and I think you've just got to rate them a bit differently
Mm.
than the start of the year. Still, I mean, they're still, as good as the pieces are on the ground. They're not that. They don't have as many grade talents as the other teams do.
Hmm.
But you'll probably mention a person who's come back and absolutely revolutionized their game.
Yeah, he's
But
he's
yeah,
on the list.
yeah. But yeah, as I said, they're just getting the most out of their players now. As I said, a lot of the fringier, or not even fringy, but the more pickups, getting a lot more. The younger kids are their flaws, their worst games are getting a lot better. They're able to contribute even if they're not quite getting the games off their terms.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's really good to see.
Yeah, I completely agree. So the scoreline for this game was 12-13-85 to 12-7-79. A very lucky free kick in the final minute of the game secured the win for Hawthorn. It was the entire game, especially that last quarter, was really, really thrilling to watch. I'm glad I got to watch it because it was
Mm,
actually really exciting. Um, because it was a come from behind win. Hawthorn were down in the last, and then they came back, fought really valiantly. I want to before I start going through players specifically, I want to give a brief shout out to Mabior Chol, former Richmond player. I thought
yeah,
he's
yeah.
I thought he's really really picked up his work rate, something that he didn't really have too much of when he was at the
Mm,
Tigers or when he was at the Suns. And especially he might have taken one of the marks of the year uh, in this
mm.
game. I still think Jamie Elliott's from a couple weeks back will probably end up being mark of the year. Um,
Very hard to beat, yeah.
but I thought he took a ripper mark, and it's definitely in a really good contention.
Oh, absolutely. And, I do agree. And I think this is just, again, when you see bottom teams get these sort of pickups like Marbio Chol and all that, I think they're like, oh, we'll get a veteran or like, like that mid-range player that's not quite a veteran, but at least getting consistency. But the problem is when you do grab them from their top teams, they're also like, for most of them, it's like the first time they might not get the structure they like. They tend to dip off. And I think that's what we saw with Marbiol in the Suns. But yeah, as I said, now with Sam Mitchell, he's got a very defined forward role. I think he even pinch hits in the ruck too occasionally.
Yeah, he does, because he's got the height for it.
So, yeah, exactly. So, you can play a lot better when you know exactly what you want to do. And I think, as I said, he was pretty good. 2 goals, 1 off the stat sheet. The only thing really holding him back is against him. But otherwise, a very solid contributor.
Yeah, great. All right, so I'm going to touch on a couple of more notable players this week. Starting off with former Essendon player Massimo D'Ambrosio. An insane pickup for Hawthorn. And the numbers that he's putting up this season is elite. He's, from what I could find, he's the number 1 wingman in the competition right now, which is a pretty insane call considering, again, where Hawthorn started. But
yeah.
So this week,
it's pretty hard to metrically find it, but I think in terms of just what Hawthorn are able to generate from the wing, and the fact Messi and D'Ambrosio is living on the wing, you've got to give him credit there.
Yeah, like he's permanently a wingman. He doesn't change his positions like some other wingmen have to because of team rotations, whatever. And it has been really, really good for them. He finished with 23 touches at 91.3% efficiency, 9 contested possessions, 5 intercepts, 6 marks, 3 clearances, 7 score involvements, and 18 pressure acts. I think he was also one of the hardest runners during the game, being, that's usually a common wingman role. And it's, again, credit where he's due. He could be an All-Australian at the end of the season.
It's not far-fetched. Again, it depends. Like I said, unfortunately for wing, it depends how much.
Yeah, that's the other issue.
Sometimes it just goes to the midfielders, but he'll definitely be up there. Like I haven't actually thought about who I'd rate as the best wingers, but it's definitely food for thought. Maybe I'll come back at you next week.
Statistically, as far as I'm aware, he's currently ranked number 1, which is very impressive. All right, now we're going to move on to Will Day. He's been really clean.
Too earlier.
Yeah, I figured. Since coming back from injury, he's been massive. 26 touches at 76.9% efficiency, 12 contested possessions, 5 intercept possessions, 6 marks, 3 inside 50s, 3 clearances, 6 score involvements, 10 tackles, and 27 pressure acts. He's definitely that key cog in the midfield that they always need, like us in Toronto. It's just that one player who has that specific drive.
Yeah, and it's also his ability to link up, because he's not necessarily like going to win the most clearances per game, but he's so important to their setup. And I think it's also a bit what we were missing from them before, was they had some good outside movement, but in terms of linking that up to the midfield, they were sort of struggling. But he's just a player that, is not only good, generally still pretty good around the stoppages, but on transition, he'll give you that threatening option. That's just such a good ball user going inside 50. But if you pay too much attention in the inside, players like Josh Weddle, Connor McDonald, and D'Ambrosio can also get you.
Well, speaking of Connor McDonald, he's exactly the next player I was going to mention. Finished with 19 touches, 7 contested possessions, 3 inside 50s, 2 clearances, 9 score involvements, 21 pressure acts, and a 2-1 scoreline. It's good to see him hit the scoreboard. I want to also give a shout out again to Blake Hardwick. I thought he had another ripping game back in defense. As much as I did like him as a forward, like seeing him up forward, he is really, really good in defense, and I'm glad they have a lot of consistency now in their defense. And then to the Giants, brief shout out to Toby Green for coming out in the orange and charcoal helmet after a knock that was a little scary at first, but he came out fine, no concussion or anything. But they put the helmet on him just so he's just to be safe. It's funny because you don't really want to see a player like that in a helmet, but do what you got to do. But again, shout out to Xavier O'Halloran. He had a ripping game, collecting 15 touches, 80% efficiency, 7 contested possessions, 3 intercept possessions, 3 clearances, 7 score involvements, 6 tackles, 26 pressure acts, and 4 goals, being the leading goal scorer for the entire game.
Yeah.
Which is, he's not the type of player that you expect to see on the score. Have a big impact on the scoreboard, but it's good that they have multiple contributors.
And I'd say he's been a player on the bubble too. Like, he hasn't quite gotten it together in terms of like consistent games. He's shown flashes, but as I said, obviously I didn't watch this game, but I have sensed that this sort of performance from him may have been coming. But yeah, as I said, he's just been a bit let down by his own efficiency at times. So hopefully he continues that way, because I do like some of the work he's been putting in.
He is consistent when he's on, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And then Kieran Breaks, very, very consistent ruckman, which is, always you always love to see a very consistent ruckman. He finished with 21 touches in the middle, 12 contested possessions, 5 inside 50s, 11 clearances, 6 score involvements, 4 tackles, and 16 pressure acts. I believe he also may have won the hitouts, because I don't think Hawthorn still aren't really playing much without a decent ruckman.
I can give you the now. He was better than all of the Hawthorn players combined. It was 17 for Reeves, 1 for Nash, 5 for Weddle.
Wait, because the Hawthorn still aren't playing with Meek. Like, Meek's still out. Who's their primary ruckman.
Yeah. And Reeves got injured in the third quarter.
He's
very limited.
He is the only injury, thankfully. But it was a back injury, which is not good for a tall. Back issues are very, very bad for a tall. That could actually
keep you out. Yeah, they'll have to reconfigure somehow.
Especially because I don't think Meek will be back this week. So another easy ruckman game for Toby Nankervis. But I don't think it'll be too long until Meek comes back. I think maybe post-bye for them, I think.
Yeah. I mean, look, they've got a lot of small forwards that haven't quite gotten together there. Maybe you just tape 2 of them together. Stack
just
them
put him in a trench coat.
Yeah. Maybe that's how you get the wizard time on ground. What's his name? The one who hasn't been that great, but he's pretty exciting.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah. I mean...
put him on top of someone. Maybe if Kalshadir is inaccurate, he's having a 0-4 game.
Just throw him in the rock.
Go on his shoulders and yeah, exactly. I mean, we do say some pretty insightful things, but please, if you're listening,
take that one with a grain of salt, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Do you want to talk about the most boring game of the round?
Yeah, I do actually want to say something. For the Giants, their midfield, honestly, it's not been as effective as it has been in terms of really just accuracy, really. I think that's probably one of the biggest things, turnovers in the midfield, because they have had, reasonable dominances in some games. But I think, just the amount of turnovers that get generated from them, because they're a very turnover-prone team, but, I think that's starting to affect some of their movement.
Yep, I agree.
Sort of hindering their performances.
I think,
that's just something.
I think Toby Bedford has been really, really quiet, for the past month. I think he's one of those players that needs to try and step up a little, because earlier this season, he was a massive standout player for them throughout the midfield.
Yeah.
But, he's just been very, very quiet lately.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, okay, I'll stop stalling now, and we'll go to what was truly
the most boring game of the round.
I mean, Saints fans might have enjoyed some of it. I mean, look, it was a terrible matchup on paper. I think we talked about it a bit last week.
Yeah.
We've got the matchup of the inside midfield nullifying Saints versus a team that needs midfield support. They get a lot of goals from their midfield units to fire up. So You could already see an avenue where scoring's limited. Suns, obviously, through that. Saints just limit themselves because they're nice.
Mm-hmm.
They love giving teams a chance in defense. We were them too much. They had a pretty okay win. Yeah, as I said, I think the Suns delivered probably what was the worst display of ball movement. With the middle of the ground being such a rare sight outside of centre bounce.
Mm-hmm.
The Saints, conversely, as I mentioned before, they would make a meal out of going inside 50, resulting in a Groundhog Day of the Suns turning it over in defense, only for like the ball to get turned over back in going inside forward 50. You play that on repeat. Sam Flanders gets 42 possessions and the Suns end up losing 7-9 51 to 7-6 48. Yeah, as I mentioned, in terms of possession, Saints trounced Gold Coast from the start.
Mm-hmm.
They struggled to convert that into goals. But apart from losing Howard early, they seem to be winning most of the matchups. And when I say losing Howard, I mean in terms of injury, Diggle Howard.
Yeah.
So they ended up giving Windhager, fresh off his clamping performance on young Harley Reid, onto Tuke Miller, who had impact only very late in the game. Important impact, but mitigated. Josh Battle was playing spare man and keeping Lukosius very quiet.
Mm-hmm.
On his switch forward when he did. I think that was a bit later in the game too. And Mason Wood with Howard going down, and went on Jed Walter, he shut the sort of young gun down. While Walter, I think, has been underperforming, or being a bit less of impact than what you want to see in a rookie, he did have an interrupted preseason, so I hope as the season goes on, he might find a bit of consistency. Not going to judge him too harshly, but the Suns could use more forward options. So hopefully late in the year that might come up. But yeah, solid defensive effort from the combo of Collins, Uland, and Ballard. Held the Saints pretty much with arms of reach, despite leading metrically up until three-quarter time. Dan Butler was pretty much the only player in the entire game to take hold offensively. Gold Coast would surge late. Baldy Uland denying almost all Saints entries as he set up some nice play. While on the other hand, Jack Sinclair would set up the Saints' most dangerous plays in the last quarter. It wasn't a high-scoring surge. It was like 3 goals. But it was probably the most exciting bit of the night for much of that fourth quarter. But yeah, nothing much was generated. And the game sort of ended in an anticlimax as Mac Andrews was called in a controversial free kick against Max King.
Which the AFL have come out and said should not have been awarded.
Yeah, exactly. They were both holding each other. It was very soft anyway, but there was no way to determine who got the free kick out of that. It was just a coin flip. And so close in front of goal. It didn't give them the game. Like, they still had time. I think they had 4 minutes left by memory. But in terms of momentum, it really killed, for what was a pretty great defensive effort in bits of the last. And yeah, as I said, Suns had one last roll of the dice, 30 seconds left. A slip by Tuke Miller from 10 seconds to go, trying to play on. Sort of just summed up the night for the Gold Coast in what Dimmer, your former coach, described as a terrible game of football. Honestly, pretty good analysis, I think.
Maybe it's just the Marvel Stadium thing. He hates going there.
It could be.
Every time he's gone there, the games have been really weird.
Well, yeah, and he's had a terrible record. I think they said it was 6 losses and a draw ever since he made that comment about Marvel Stadium.
That sounds very accurate. Like, I think we only played at Marvel Stadium. I think last year we only played there like maybe 3 times.
Yeah.
I know one of them was against the Gold Coast Suns, funnily enough, that we lost.
Yeah.
So yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, and look, I'm just gonna go quickly through the players because I'll wrap this game up fairly quickly. There's not too much to talk about. For St Kilda, Is Marshall, I think, is probably the best player for them, who I hadn't actually mentioned already. He sort of smashed Moyle, and in terms of both possession, effectiveness, he was really good. He actually led the clearances with 7. It was a very mitigated midfield battle. So having that ruckman that can still get hands on ball, very, very helpful. Steele had modest numbers in his count, but his pressure and ball use were absolutely fantastic. Led the ground ball gets with 11. Second in pressure acts, Terrell with 28, and 6 score involvements and clearances. Hunter Clark also swung from halfback in the middle, sort of interchanged with Sinclair, and was very impactful at times. For the Gold Coast, obviously Flanders racked up huge possession with 42. Still had a good mix of intercepts and contested acts. Still one of the best players of the night, although, as I said, 20 of his disposals were pretty cheap. Joel Jeffries, again, he was another one that was just sort of benefiting from a lot of ineffective ball movement in the back line. But, he still had a career night with 29, so congratulations to him. 25 of those were uncontested. But Sam Collins and Bodie Uland by far had the best nights for Gold Coast. Saints had a lot more entries. They were fighting their hardest to keep, the game close for the Gold Coast. Collins had 5 intercept marks. So did Uland, actually. They both did. 8 regular intercepts each. 18 and 23 possessions. 11 total tackles. And just hardly being beaten all night. In a game where there were a few free kicks given away, they had none. And also, just a little bit of a note, Swallow replaced Fiorini as sub and had pretty good impact, and kicked a pretty clutch goal when he came on. So, yeah, it was... Overall, though, in terms of structure, the Suns had abysmal forward pressure the entire night. They only generated 3 shots from general play. One of them being the Tuke Miller goal that put them in front. But, if the ball went in, it was either intercepted or rebounded. Couldn't get anyone to bring it to ground. Ben King presented okay. Ben Long, he's been a bit quiet the last few weeks, but his pressure still has been around. But it's really just those two. It was just... and there was also a few other structural things I thought that was a bit weird with the Suns. There was a few times when they were having shots for goal, and they would fall short, and they would have uncontested marks in, a close game in the goal line. No one on them, no one bringing the ball to ground, no one, generating those, forward line things. And, it was just... I would say there was at least 3 incidents where it was uncontested. Despite being shots from like 45 to 50 out. Overall, though, the Saints, I think they were a bit cute when they led the ball forward, especially, short kicks. There was a period of time where they gave away not 15s, about 4 of them in a row, trying to move their forward inside 50. Turnovers was a bit of a killer for them. But, when you look at their tackling, ball movement, ground ball gets, they were the far better team. They just failed to capitalize off their own game plan. But at least for them, they had it set up. The Suns are very suspect at this point of being a bit too one-dimensional, especially since their forward line and outside midfield has failed to provide for them. And, if they are going to rack up these uncontested possessions, they need better work up the ground. To, not just be chipping around aimlessly. Otherwise, they're just going to be, ground out because, they're not the best defensive team on transition. They've got an okay back, one-on-one matchups, but again, that doesn't mean too much when you turn the ball over. It was just the Saints somehow managed to still, even trying their hardest not to capitalize off it. They managed to get the win. And honestly, it made the Spoon Bowl, which we're probably going to talk about either next or later.
I know it's going to be next.
Yeah, it made that game look really good.
Mm.
And that game was woeful for 3/4. So, I mean, it was close. 3 points.
I mean, there's nothing. Close games do make it more exciting, but it's because these two game styles, they clash awkwardly and they're just not fun to watch.
No, very much so. And I think it's also the other thing, as I said, sometimes you don't want to say, the Suns aren't bringing enough effort away from home and all that. But, as I said, I mentioned it last week, when they sort of rely on getting turnovers to get score, as I said, that their just general outside ball movement isn't that fantastic in, more neutral style play.
Mm-hmm.
As I said, they're just going to find a way to do that in other venues.
Yeah.
And I know the Saints still turned it over a bit. But yeah, as I said, just generating those back half turnovers as well. Yeah, it'll take another year, I think. As I said, they've got some pretty good players. Their structure's been a lot better than it has, like, week in, week out. Like, the Suns have been a bit more consistent, I would even say, than last year.
Yeah, they have.
It's just, the part of consistency is, they're not, chucking the baby with the bathwater each week. It's what Dimmer can provide, but on the flip side, you just got to accept some of these weaknesses as they find their feet. That's why I say I don't think they'll make finals this year, but I mean, again, they're still in the mix.
No, and that's like
gotta go away win though.
The thing is with the Suns is that aside from like the whole hoodoo about them not being able to win away from home, is that this is only their first season with Dimmer. Like they still have a lot to grow. Like when Dimmer took over Richmond, it took him a long time to get us to where we needed to be.
Yeah.
The Suns, especially the Suns board, need to have a lot of faith in Dimmer and need to trust the process that he is trying to work with. Like, because they have some insane pieces. Like, you look at their midfield alone and it's absolutely stacked. It's just about getting the best out of the players that aren't the massive standouts.
Yeah, and I think it's also, too, is like getting these defensive efforts. Because I think too often, because you don't want to go too defensive as a, young team.
Mm-hmm.
But you can often see like players never develop because they never get that two-way part of their game. Obviously for the Suns, one of the biggest person against that is Matt Rao, who's sort of filling that gap for them, who's like saying, okay, I'm not going to rack up possessions as much as I used to, but, I'm going to go in hard at tackling. I'm going to make sure that, we're still faring okay in the contested possessions. And honestly, despite his like drop in possessions, is still probably one of the best 50 players at the moment.
Absolutely.
I'm only saying 50 because I'm not thinking about it and don't want to go too generous or whatever. But he's maybe not the best player on the Gold Coast, but definitely
one of the more.
He might be still.
No, he probably still is the best player at the Gold Coast Suns. Like it's definitely close between like Flanders and Miller, and maybe Miller's probably number 3. I'll be honest, but it's probably mostly between him and Flanders.
I think Miller's more important for leadership.
Miller's one of their veterans, and there's a reason why he's stayed at the Suns as long as he has.
Yeah, like I said, he hasn't had some of the bigger games, but in terms of always making sure he has an impact. He's been pretty good.
Absolutely.
But yeah, as I said, it'll come, and as I said, they just need that more. Yeah, they just need a lot more parts of the game going at this point. But yeah, I'll say, as I said, I think Ned Moyle probably isn't quite AFL standard. Like when I was looking at his ruck work, it's so night and day compared to Wits.
Yeah.
Like Wits just taps with purpose, and Ned Moyle, look, all the stereotypical ruckman jokes. Is definitely,
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean.
He highlights the long distance between brain to limb. That's all I'll say.
That's a
He
good
might
way.
be a smart person.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
All right.
Look, I don't mean that personally, just in a football sense.
All right. Speaking of the Spoon Bowl, let's head over to it.
Mm.
Um, it was a game that no one was expecting to go the way that it did. Especially because it was over at Optus Stadium. The West Coast Eagles, incredibly woeful in front of goal. It was very disappointing to see, but for 3/4 of the game, they were holding on until a really, really strong late surge from the Kangaroos gave them their first victory of the season. Scoreline 8-17, 65 to 11-8, 74. I I did have a lot. I did actually have this game on for most of the day. I went out.
Unfortunately.
I went out for a bit of the I ended the third quarter, bit of the fourth quarter. Just went for a walk, stretched my legs because I hadn't really been out all weekend. I went to go buy some snacks because I wanted to stay up late and play games and stuff Saturday night. So that's what I did.
Such is the bachelor
And
life.
I come back. I come back from buying these snacks. West Coast were up when I left, by the way. I come back and they lose the game. What is what is this? So I had to go back and have a look at what happened.
Yeah. So it was like some point, I think, just after, because there was nothing at halftime. Like Kangaroos open goalless, kicked a few goals, had a minor lead. Then I think Larky kicked a few goals in a row, gave them it was like maybe, I think it was like 60 to 21 or something.
Off the top of my head,
27?
it was something like that.
Yeah. And then Eagles just went bang, 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 bang. And after being so inaccurate, because I only saw the last quarter, I should say. I just came home and I was just like, well, I might as well. It's just when you get home, you want to settle down, chill, and pretty brain dead watching. But as I said, it was exciting, and they were kicking some pretty clutch goals for a team that was 217 or whatever at that point. And then, what can I say? North just really,
they just put the Jets on.
Yeah, as I said, I thought it was 2 goals, but it was actually... Oh, yeah, okay. So it was the Eagles just got ahead. North just sort of, they were still attacking. It was just when the Eagles went forward, they were always converting. I don't think the inside 50 count in the last quarter was actually that lopsided, despite Eagles kicking
it was fairly balanced. From what I saw.
Yeah, and the Eagles kicked 6 goals to 3 in the last. So, but yeah, as I said, obviously Jai Sinkin got a controversial. Oh, I should say, who was it? Oh, Yo got a controversial on the ball against him. Something we haven't mentioned yet. On the ball was weird this round.
Yeah, there were definitely some calls that were either called too early or too late. But
yeah. Yeah, honestly, if you skip last round, I wouldn't have noticed that there was the rule change. Compared to last week where it was definitely distinct. But anyway, Jai Sinkin got one of the more aggressive on the ball in his favor. Kicked a very clutch goal. Great to see actually, because he's someone who struggled a bit this year as captain.
Yeah.
To kick the winning goal like that. Really good for him. And then, Paul Curtis just kicked another goal. I can't even remember how he kicked it, but I think the Eagles are a bit deflated after that call.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
but again,
sort of finished up.
Credit to North. They're finally on the board. First win of the season. Congratulations to them.
They kept a team under 100.
And they did.
Both in a row.
It's very impressive, actually, that they managed to pull this out from out of nowhere. And from both of my tipping competitions, pretty much everyone tipped West Coast across the board. No one was expecting this, but here we are. They finally did it.
Yeah, and I think, one of the biggest things against them, score off turnover.
Mm-hmm.
They still generated a lot of chances. Like West Coast were 3-10-28, compared to 8-3-51 for North.
Yeah.
So, I mean, slightly less opportunities for North, but they just converted a lot better. But 13 scoring shots off turnovers still isn't great.
It's definitely
terrible,
on the lower
but you know
end,
what I mean.
But yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But in terms of what North like to do, one of the best ways against West Coast to stop them scoring is to limit their opportunities from stoppage and clearances. They dominated. Obviously, I can't really give the whole term perspective. And in terms of individual performance, I mean, pretty much the biggest standout was Nick Larkey.
Yeah, I'm gonna run
goals?
through it. Yeah. I'm gonna run through it in a minute.
Oh, okay, you got cool.
Before I do though,
you can go
I
through
want to
the
ask you a
individuals.
very, very important question. Would the Eagles would have won if Harley Reid was playing? Or would North have found a way to actually negate his impact?
I don't think it matters. Like, at the end of the day, the Eagles have structural problems still.
Yes, absolutely.
And, those two, really big wins in a row sort of cast a shadow over it. And, as I said, it's what... And at least show that the West Coast have a good peak. But they're going to have to... And whether that comes from sacrificing a bit of their clearance work, as I said, they're one of the most aggressive clearance teams.
Mm-hmm.
But also means they get a lot of score the other way. Their high turnover, which normally comes from a bit more aggressive movement.
Mm-hmm.
So it's up to them whether they actually want to sacrifice it or just back themselves in saying, no, players will get better over time. That'll patch up. But yeah, honestly, the most consistent thing this year for the Eagles has been defense. And, as I said, they're still conceding a lot of inside 50s. So, look, you can say Harley Reid or not, I think that's just a bit beside the point. Like, they could have won. But, that doesn't change anything. Like, there's teams with good midfield players. And
Absolutely.
there will always be. Like, having the best midfield doesn't... And we've seen it, like Western Bulldogs.
Yeah,
they've got a fantastic midfield.
They have an insane midfield. They are completely stacked,
Exactly.
but they're just not necessarily their work rate, but just the way that their game plan clashes just doesn't work all that well when they're completely negated.
Exactly. So, as I said, it'll be something to talk about. And yeah, it's like, it's so what, like in this sort of game where you're at home, you're wanting to prove you're a bit better, and like the optimism is warranted. And look, A17 is a bit of a freak performance.
Yeah, that's very uncharacteristic of West Coast because especially after the past month that they've had, you don't expect them to be that inaccurate.
Yeah, exactly. But, as I said, if you look at the clearances, though, like, this is a bit interesting. Elliot Yeo, 8 clearances.
Mm-hmm.
Dom Sheed, 6.
Mm-hmm.
The rest, 2 and under.
Yeah, it's not...
So...
And neither of them, are ruck clearances, really. You expect more for a ruckman to try and stand up. But no, it was their veterans that had to do all the work.
Yeah, exactly. So Flynn had 2, Williams had 1. And as I said, there's some, it's, and as I said, like Dom Sheed had 6, but had little impact anywhere else. So, as I said, in all honesty, like as much as Harley's been getting, like you got to give a shout out to Elliot Yeo too.
Oh,
again, you'll talk a bit more individually.
Yeah, I'm gonna actually touch on him in a sec.
Yeah, as I said, he was the lone star for the Eagles, at least in terms of forward generating stuff.
Yeah, I completely agree. So yeah, speaking of young superstars, I guess we'll go with in this case because just talking about Harley Reid, Harry Sheezel. I love what he does. And this week was no exception. He looked amazing off halfback, going through the middle as well. 30 touches, 12 contested possessions, 3 inside 50s, 2 clearances, 4 goal assists, 8 score involvements, 5 tackles, a goal to his own name, and 24 pressure acts. He did so much work. Not only in like negating his own opponent, but he did a lot of run and carry throughout that middle off half back. He is probably one of the fastest runners in the league. I haven't actually looked at a statistic on that, but he's got some good legs, and that's the sort of hope that him and George Wardlaw as well. Wardlaw had a really, really good game.
Yeah,
definitely probably top 2 for North Melbourne, apart from Nick Clarkey. I think Simpkin. I'm about to touch him as well. They also had phenomenal games. But yeah, those young stars. Well, they should be young stars. They're number 1 draft picks. That's what you want to see out of this North outfit. Is lift.
Sure, yeah.
And it's really, really good to see, especially from Sheasel and Wardlaw. Again, you touched on Simpkin before, but he had a really, really strong captain's game. 28 touches, 12 contested possessions, 5 marks, 7 inside 50s, 5 clearances, 7 tackles, 18 pressure acts, and 2 goals of his own. And then, of course, spearhead Nick Larkey, 15 touches at 100% efficiency, 6 marks, 7 score involvements, 4 tackles, 14 pressure acts, and 5 goals. It was still close game. You expect that of teams that are sitting at the the lower end of the ladder, but it was a very, very consistent game from North, because the pieces that you want to be firing, they were firing very, very effectively. Exactly.
And it was interesting because Josh Simpkin technically spent the most, or attended the most centre bounces in this game for the year at this point. So, as I said, they've got pieces to work with. In terms of that midfield combination, right now it's just about setting it up to be consistent. Yeah. Because too often we've seen them win midfield clearances, but
then lose in the other areas. Off of it. Yeah.
Yeah, or even that, because as I said, you have to run 2 ways. Simpkin does put a lot of effort even when he's not winning. There's a few other players for North that are a bit.
It's like what we've been asking out of Hawthorn that we're finally seeing is consistency. It's about consistency going forward, and running 2 ways, just about finding that consistency.
Yeah, because as I said, their backline still struggling. I actually think it's been a bit better over the last few weeks, but you know what I mean? It's just they don't have much to work with.
Yeah, they're still figuring it out.
Yeah, exactly. But as I said, it's a launch pad, and will it end up being a streak? Probably not.
No, I don't think so. But I hope I hope it's not their only win for the season.
Yeah, I hope there's some competition for Winspoon, in a good way, of course, but
preferably not for Richmond, but we'll see about that.
Yeah, I know. It's
yeah.
But yeah, as I said, I would still have them heavy favourites, but win's a win.
Yeah, exactly. You take that.
It took a bit to go into their favour for it, but and they got it.
They got it where it mattered. They won the game when it mattered, and that's
exactly
all that matters right now is that they're on the board.
And they won most possessions still. The Eagles, it's weird. In terms of once the ball went inside 50, they weren't actually that great, even with the amount of behinds that they got.
Mm-hmm.
So as I said, there was even signs that again, they were defending all right. They won most of the metrics, but still lost the inside 50 count.
Yeah.
But you know what I said is just. It just seemed a bit more structured, whereas the Eagles was just a blind bit of form out of nowhere. I just did not see that coming.
No, no one did.
It's still impressive, but not something you want to rely on as a team. I think Simpson will know that the Eagles pretty much only played maybe 10 minutes of really good football. I didn't watch all of it, but you know what I mean? It's
Like
It
I
wasn't
was
that
only really
much.
idly watching it, but you could see like the sort of
Yeah.
impact that someone like Elliot Yeo has in a game like this, or just in general, because Elliot Yeo has been performing up to his like all
Mm.
Australian standard like over the past month or two, and it's been really good to see. It's just they haven't been able to stack the
Yeah.
wins. But yeah, again,
Exactly. And like you look at every team sheet from Eagles after a win, it's just like Elliot Yeo,
Harley
you
Reid,
know,
Jake
Harley Reid,
Waterman,
Jake Waterman.
and then
And
everyone else.
then in terms of other offensive, nah, there's just nothing. It's all defenders who've been really good. Again, Brady Hoff continues to be really good. Alex Witherden had a pretty standout game.
Liam Duggan's been really
You know,
good.
yeah, and that's more like a halfback role. Yeah, so who knows?
But yeah, again,
It's
Elliot Yeo numbers: 23 touches, 16 contested possessions, 4 inside 50s, 8 clearances, 7 score involvements, 13 tackles, which I think was leading the game, and 27 pressure acts.
yes,
So yeah, like he was just doing all of the grunt work in the midfield, putting his body on the line, and yeah, just they couldn't get it done afterwards. It was just yeah, the lack of consistency in the forward line. Um, but
yeah,
I do want to shout out Jamie Cripps. I thought Cripps actually had a pretty solid performance. 27 touches, 7 contested possessions, 8 marks, 6 inside 50s, 11 score involvements, 5 tackles, 23
yeah.
pressure acts, and a 1-3 scoreline. Unfortunately,
Yeah, I was gonna say 1-3 was bad, but
one
he
three
did set
isn't
up a lot
good,
of
but
plays.
he had a consistent work rate in terms of getting the ball into the forward line, giving them
Yeah,
opportunities to score. It was just a poor conversion rate.
yeah, exactly. And he's not the only one, to be fair.
No, yeah, it was a team loss. Um,
uh,
all right, do you want to take on the first of the big games from
that
this
was
week?
first, wasn't it? Yeah. So it's weird because it didn't pan out the way we sort of expected it to.
Oh, I mean, I
But
did.
the end result was similar. No, well, the end result was similar.
Yeah.
I didn't quite think Geelong would head up to such a big lead. But yeah, as I said, Sydney came out of a very long bye. Their last game being May the 23rd, which was 17 days ago,
Yeah,
and there was very apparent rust from the would-be premiership favourites. Cats kicked the first 6 goals, as I said, before they would Sydney would register at first. Sydney were turning the ball over. They were a bit unlucky. A couple of their shots were okay. They just hit the post.
mhm.
Especially Joel Marty. I think he presented up forward very dangerously. Just kicked a couple of behinds, kicked the post, and then continued to have a pretty good game. Yeah, as I said, they were quite limited in their attack though. Geelong were moving the ball with ease.
Mhm.
There was some really good first quarter performances, specifically O'Shane Mullen, Graham Myers, and Tyson Stengel,
Yep.
all really good. Then from then on in, it was just the Sydney brand of ruthless efficiency in attack and restriction of ball movement. Sydney would smash the clearances, but also dominate in wing play, as Geelong were really just forced to try and get a turnover, which is where they got most of their score. Which it still means they had good effort in their forward 50,
Mm.
but it's very hard to try and win a game, especially against a quality team like Sydney in that way. Igniting this in the middle to start with was Heaney and Grundy.
Yep.
They would dominate centre bounce work, but also not quite congruently because they actually came off a bit of back dominance. But it'd enter one person into the game, Errol Goulden, absolutely mammoth on the wings. He got 15 score involvements and 3 direct goal assists from those.
Oh, yeah.
And he was just giving it to players left, right, and centre. Like Abadi, who I mentioned earlier, Papley also got more involved as the movement got better. And he really grabbed the game by the scruff of the neck for Sydney. I think all of Papley's 4 goals were like halfway past the third quarter.
I believe that's correct.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very, very big late. And yeah, as I said, the people making that defensive stand that I was talking about to set up that transition, Tom McCartan coming back. Great to see him. He had a really big return, shut down Neil, and then Hawkins
Yep.
were clamped after half-time. So Neil, I think, was subbed off with injury. Cameron eventually had to shift forward as, the options just dried up for Geelong. Cameron started playing sort of more a defensive wing role to start
Yeah, they've
with.
been playing a lot further up the ground, like over the past couple of weeks, and it hasn't been a good look for them. I feel like Geelong's consistency earlier in the season, I think, came off the back of Cameron's scores. Like a lot of their scoring came from Cameron early on, and because he was played predominantly up forward, and I think Hawkins was the one who was playing more midfield. But now that they've swapped, it just doesn't seem like it's as consistent.
Look, I mean, I sort of agree with you, but I will get in because I have noticed a bit and I looked up a few things. How, well, let's put it frankly, bad Geelong's defense has been. And I think that's just sort of a move that they've tried to do to mitigate it. But the problem is, it's currently not working.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think Cameron shifting back in terms, like, he's not playing spare man. It's just, his presence. He can, like, try and generate a few more intercept marks a bit, in the balls going inside forward 50. So, those intercepts off halfback more than, back pocket or, fullback.
Yep.
But I mean, he wasn't even getting those. So, as I said, eventually you just got to play him up forward. As I said, not that much for him. And as I said once, Geelong did make a late charge. A few really nice goals. But Cameron, I think, even got 2 of those goals. So I did sort of charge them putting back forward. But then Papley, as I mentioned, just said, no. 3 goals in 15 minutes, a goal after, just like a cherry on top goal at the very end. After, Sydney put the game to bed after a freakishly good Warner goal. Basically just outrun someone in a 2-on-1 contest. Set up, I think, by McInerney, was a really good kick. Beautiful set play, just highlighted their class. They won the game 16-16, 112 to 82, and they were brutishly good. Like, it was honestly, like, it's weird. Like, they were like with that long a break between seeing them play, and then it was just like, oh god,
it's like a switch was just flipped. Like they just suddenly had all of the rust off in an instant, and they were just back to their dominating best.
Yeah, and as I said, like, it was a bit weird because, like, both teams actually had some really nice conversions in times. As I said early, Sydney missed a few shots and, 16-16's, whatever. But, with that, they also made some pretty nice goals. And both teams defensively still pushed out a bit. Like, there weren't exactly goals that were easy for them.
Yeah.
But as I said, just Sydney had a lot more of them and came from very nice setup. Obviously I'm going to say more of his stats because, just mentioning his goal assists, doesn't do it justice. Errol Goulden, this was 2023 Errol Goulden. I've mentioned this before on the podcast. He's been fantastic. He's just played a different role this year.
Yeah.
This is the role he played last year. That OMS won him to Brownlow. 37 disposals, 76% efficiency, 8 marks, 5 tackles, 7 inside 50s, and a goal. Blitzhalves was on him. Did not care. It was a weird tag. Like, I don't know.
I don't think Blitzhalves was the right call. And I don't know if it's because of like the height difference that they have, but I don't. Yeah, he's not a hard runner like Goulden is. Yeah.
Well, like, when you say hard runner, it's like he does run a lot, but he's just like he's gonna get outmatched for pace.
He's a bigger body with a slower pace.
Exactly. So, I don't know what was happening on there, but there was a few weird decisions, or a few failed things for Geelong. Talking about impact versus opponent, Brodie Grundy, 25 disposals, 21 contested, 11 ground ball gets.
11 Brownlow guards at this rate.
Yeah, why not? 13 hitouts to advantage. And as I said, gave Stanley an absolute toweling. Like, honest, I know Stanley's not exactly a fan favourite for Geelong. Yeah, this game is sort of one where you can understand why they might be a bit frustrated. Just by the lack of production against. Like, if you're not going to win the taps, which, you know, it's pretty hard against Grundy.
Yeah.
Like, you've got to at least have that mitigating part of your game, which Stanley didn't. So, you know, just let Grundy have that complete, because, you know, Grundy is that complete ruckman. Like, he will go across the ground and beat you up. He will, like, rack up clearances if you'll let him. He only had 3 for that game, but, you know, he was just that second midfielder, really. And, yeah, as I said, overall, it just, yeah, it was quite anemic by Stanley. I don't want to go on in too much, but it was probably one of the most one-sided ruck contests I've seen this year. That wasn't just like someone being injured. Like first ruckman versus first ruckman. That's what I'll say.
Yeah, I get that.
So, yeah, moving on from that, you know, honestly, not even under the radar because he was still fantastic. Heaney was the usual mix of hard middle work and forward impact. He kicked 2 goals, 5 tackles and 5 clearances with his 26 possessions. Absolutely fantastic. Rowbottom collected another 10 tackles, which is just a par day out for him now. He's almost averaging 10 per game. I think it's like 9.4 leads the tackling count, just above Matt Rowell on 9. And McInerney had a massive last quarter and reigned between the arcs all game. 24 disposals, 11 contested at 83% efficiency, 5 intercepts, 8 score involvements, and a goal. As I mentioned, specifically in the forward line, Amadi, I thought, was the best lead-up option all night, despite his early misses. 5 marks inside 50, 3 goals, 2. And, you know, Papley, as I mentioned, fired up late for his 4-1. So, Amadi, good all round, and then Papley just sort of joined in. But, you know, as the usual for Sydney, they just... a few goals from the midfield. The other tolls just chipping in at times. It's probably the closest thing they have to a flaw is that it's not normally... is only one forward that tends to click at a time, but at least in terms of toll forwards. But yeah, I will say Amadi, I think, has actually had a great season, but it's been a hard-working season. In terms of presentation. For Geelong, their middle work was great early, but dropped off hard after quarter times. Atkins and Holmes, I think, were probably the best 4-quarter performers in general for Geelong. Holmes got 23 possessions, 10 contested, 7 ground ball gets, 5 intercepts and a goal. Again, he's transitioning very well into the midfield, or inside midfield, I should say. And Atkins, 13 contested possessions, 10 ground ball gets, 7 tackles and 6 score involvements. He continues to be a tough nut. But that's really it for Geelong. Everyone else was very patchy. As I mentioned before, Stengel got a couple of his goals early. Hawkins, all his impact was early. Ocean Mullen, he was pretty much the first quarter. And then, you know, just sort of tapered off in impact, which I will say was a very good first quarter. But yeah, Bose as well. Despite getting 2 goals, his middle work dropped off. And, you know, and these were the more impactful Geelong players. Like, they had a lot of players that were... Like, they had a handful of players that were trying, but, like, failing to break through Sydney. But after that first quarter, they also had a fair bit of... I don't want to say free riders, but people that just could have no influence at the game whatsoever. And, you know, as I said, if it wasn't for that late run with not Hawkins, Cameron, it would have looked a lot uglier than it was.
Do you think that they're really missing the leadership that Dangerfield is bringing to their midfield and just their entire team?
And again, kind of like... Again, it's a problem. I won't say it's the worst problem for them. It's one of those things where I think in terms of the way they defend clearances as well, it sort of hurt because they just don't quite have enough grunts there. All their players are quite young, in terms of, their contested ball winners.
Not many of their midfielders are like big bodied either. They're like quite
No.
they're quite small.
I mean, even if Dangerfield coming back doesn't win that, but it at least makes it a bit more even. And he was doing very well before he went out. Like, it's a big loss.
Yeah, it is.
Again, like, I think for Geelong, I could see them be all right, even like some of the games before their collapse. Like, they were still running a thin midfield. Like, there's been a few games where they've, not had their best.
Yeah, Geelong has always been about speed rather than just like big body tackle grunt work.
Yeah, and as I said, I'll mention. Okay, I'll wrap it up for Sydney because like they're pretty straightforward. There was a possible glimpse of weakness with their midfield influence being curbed in the first quarter. That might be the only way teams can like dry up the well for them. I've already mentioned Amadi before being like the only real full game 12 forward option for them. So in terms of conventional attack, you can strike a weakness there. But like between you and me, let's be real. Shutting down Keeney, Golden, Warner, and Grundy when they're all such different styles of players.
It's a really tough ask for any team.
Like, exactly. Like Keeney, you want like a good inside midfield tagger that can at least defend well running forward. And if you want to shut down Golden, you have to have like a lot of pace. And I mean, you just have to be pretty. You have to be very. You have to like sacrifice a bit of your offensive game to try and shut down Golden.
Yeah,
because to keep up with him offensively, it makes it harder to run the other way. Chad Warner, you got to be very quick in the inside midfield, and you've also still got to be fairly tough. And Brody Grundy, you just have to have a good ruckman that can run around the ground.
Absolutely.
And like a team's battling to have one of the tools to shut down either of those players, let alone a way to shut down enough of each of them to make them. So it's like, it's a bit too comprehensive. It's why they seem a bit invincible right now. Maybe near the end of the year, it gets a bit easier to shut them down. That's just theory ball. I don't know. Like, it's a tough ask. They're clearly the best team by far. And, as I said, it was funny because I mentioned a bit last week and I mentioned a bit before the game. I was like, this could be like one of the best regular season teams for a while. Because who knows what happens in finals, but, this level of dominance, I don't think I've seen in the last 10 years. Hawthorn, while very good, weren't exactly. They were willing to drop a few games per season. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Richmond, even the same. Like a lot of their seasons, Adelaide, I think, were top of the ladder, or can't remember. But yeah, as I said, they were, pretty high up there, but not comprehensively beating the league.
No, okay, so
you know what I mean?
I actually zoned out for like a brief moment there, but I know exactly what you're meaning. Like, when you mentioned Richmond for that, 2017 is actually a very, very good example because the games that we lost were by massive margins. Because they were games that we quote unquote kind of needed to lose. Well, the Freo game where Mundy kicked the sealer against us, that was by a slim margin. But like Brisbane, I believe we lost to Brisbane we didn't lose to Brisbane in Brisbane. We beat Brisbane down here. We lost to Geelong in Geelong. Like, I think we lost to GWS at one point. Like, we lost to these bigger teams, these stronger teams. But we learned from those. And I think that's something that Geelong also needs to try and take from these sorts of matchups.
Yeah. Well, I said I'm going to talk a bit about them for a second, but it's also interesting for Sydney. Like, and look, I'm getting very far ahead in terms of Sydney, but, we haven't had really a big change in game style for a while.
No,
like,
not really.
it's gone uniform, don't get me wrong, but it's not like a team leading the charge. Like, you could argue maybe like Western Bulldogs 2016 in terms of ball movement sort of were a bit ahead of the game, but
and
you
then
know,
then teams started to adapting the Richmond play style when we started winning premierships with
yeah,
our
getting off
frenetic
turnover and all
tackling
that.
turnover energy.
But again, it's like not something that all teams sort of adopted. Not like the floods of Hawthorn, St Kilda, and Geelong, back in like the late 2000s. So I'm sort of wondering if like this shutdown of ball movement on the wings, like whether teams will like try and go for that, because like good teams have been exposed this year for it. And if I'm a struggling club and I'm looking to like maybe be a bit more ahead of the game, try and get a few, you sort of got to look at that and wonder maybe like, maybe like instead of investing so much in inside midfields, you got to look at
your
how
outside.
to maximize ball movement of the wings. Yeah, because as I said, it's just very apparent this year, and maybe that's just a trend of this year. Maybe it'll all go away, but. I just think that'll be interesting for the overall scheme of football.
You're not wrong at all. We've always a lot of the teams do very much consider on ball, like in ball, as very, very important to a team structure. But you look at Hawthorn's rise at the moment. You look at Essendon's rise at the moment. Granted, Essendon haven't really still played or won against massively strong teams. We are going to talk about that momentarily. But you look at how their midfield structure is, and it's their wingers, it's their outside players that are having a lot of the bigger impact.
Yeah, you still got to be solid in the midfield, and that's like both ways, defensively and offensively. But you don't have to have like a midfielder that's 25 clearances, 20 inside 50. Okay, that's very inflated. But they are
very inflated. But you get the point. Yeah.
Yeah. You just it's spread that gets consistency. Obviously in terms of finals, that's a bit different because like a midfielder inside that can grab the game by the scruff of the neck, very important. But for regular season success, setting up the final series, it might just be a bit more go-to. I do want to finish up by focusing a tiny bit on Geelong.
Yep.
Because this is something that I knew it was bad, but when I looked at the stats, I didn't realize how bad it was.
Go
on. So I've praised a lot about how good their wild style of attack is this year. But now I think they've been a bit too reliant on forward half work, and they're sort of joining the teams, struggling to move the whole of halfback. And as well as that, their defense at the moment has fallen into an absolute hole, as the Cats have allowed teams too easily into their forward 50, which has turned like last year's okay defense into one that allows the fourth most scoring shots in the league, with them conceding the second most points from defensive half, being nearly identical to Richmond. There's a gap.
There is. No,
Geelong and the next worst. And like Richmond, they have an excuse. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we have had half a team this entire season.
Yeah. And especially defense, as I said, like some of the young players that you've been trying to bring up, like you'll know better, like Young, what's the other one that looked good but got an ACL?
I'm blanking now.
Young,
Gibcus the second ACL.
Gibcus, that's it.
Young. We've had two players we've had two players get ACLs in the VFL, but I get exactly what you mean. It's been hard to build a team from all of our injuries, and that's why we have an excuse for being where we're at. But Geelong don't have that excuse. Geelong are not good at the moment in terms of that statistic.
And the one big thing that has happened, and this has now gone on for 5 games, which I've been sort of waiting for, because, the tool I use has like a form in the last 5 games button.
Oh, yeah.
But if you take away... It's not just Tom Stewart, because Tom Stewart's been okay. He's still generating...
He was also out for, very early this season, so... You can kind of give him a little bit of slack in that, but go on.
But if you take away their intercept game, like in general, their one-on-one defenders get absolutely exposed. And they are now the second worst team at defending one-on-one contests behind the Bulldogs, going at 33% loss rate in terms of one-on-one.
Mm-hmm.
And you compare that to their year average. So this is even including the form slump of 23%. So they've jumped 10%, including the crap rate.
That's pretty rough.
Yeah. So yeah, this is in the period of 5 games. So look, they need to find a way, and you're saying like things that Geelong need to do. This is what I think. They either need to find a way to protect Stewart, and that's not like, so that could just be like, hey, we're going to set you up so you're just playing 1v1, and we're going to try and find a new spare man in defense to play that role.
Yeah, make him more of a one-on-one defender rather than an intercept defender.
Exactly, because, when you send James Jordan, who went on him, like, you do sacrifice some goal-kicking ability. He's still obviously a good forward. A good defender, purely. But you know what I mean? Or you just sort of change your defensive structure to minimize or get a lot more contests and a lot more spoils, because it's just too easy scoring against them in the last period of time. And it's just because they score well, like that's never been a problem. And as I said, with the bits and pieces, like there's been some clear issues where their attack hasn't been as good as it was in those first periods. That drop off just might happen in a long season. I think that's what they desperately need to address. And, as I mentioned before, I think that's why Cameron spent a game down back, to try and find that. But yeah, honestly, I don't know if they do have any players that can sort of fill that void. Obviously, a bit of their depth is gone now that Asava's changed teams.
Yeah.
But yeah, as I said, you look at them, like the players they got. De Koning's probably the best of them, but he's not as great this year. Jack Henry, he's been a bit I've even forgotten the other one.
De Koning you probably want to keep up forward anyway. You want to keep him as like a ruck forward option because of the fact that Hawkins is probably going to end up retiring. You're only left with Cameron. Cameron's still not that far off retiring either. So he's going to be their only tall forward option at some point.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you don't have the pieces to replace him, I think he has to live down back. But yeah, like the only other one is Jake Kolodajny. Look, he's been fine, like, this year. In fact, I think there's some games where he's been really good.
Yeah, I do agree.
You know what I mean? Like, it's the only one for them.
Yeah.
So it's Jake Kolodajny, Tom Stewart, and then nothing really seems that cohesive in terms of, defensive. Like, it's not two-pronged, like, even the Bulldogs, Alex Keith, and, I'm blanking. Jones.
Oh, Jones, that's right.
Oh, even Buku Kamas, but you know what I mean? Adelaide, his defense is written, Borlace, Butts, Worrell, and it's just, there's depth, and
Geelong,
it might be a problem that just stays this year.
Yeah, because Geelong are really struggling with that.
Yeah, like, I'm not sure if that fixes, and, it could be what sends them on a bit of a downward spiral, but at the same time, they can win games off offense, so it's a bit of a wait and see, but I think teams will be looking at what Sydney did and looking at Geelong's last 5 games, and, they'll be really looking to capitalise against the Cats. They might not have a target on their back, but they're not as threatening as they once looked at the start of the year.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. All right, are you done?
Yep.
All right, let's move on to the second big game of the round, because the third big game of the round is still currently going on, as you can see down there. It's not looking very pretty. It should be a 1-point ball game, but it is currently 41-point ball game. We might end up talking about that at the end. But for now,
Seen Big Billy kick too.
Sunday night, Essendon v Carlton, a massive blockbuster game. 8 long years we have all waited, but the Mackays finally got to play on each other. And I don't actually have any statistical proof of this, but I think this might actually be the first ever round where 2 sets of twins have finally played against each other in a round. Because we had
twins, maybe not.
Because obviously we've got the Mackays, but then we've got Ben and Max King. Because we have brothers. We've got plenty of brothers throughout. Like, considering Essendon alone had 4 brothers in the Danahers, like, play on one team. There's plenty of brothers throughout the competition, and always have been. But twins specifically, I feel like, is a very much more rare phenomenon.
Yeah.
So I don't have any actual statistical proof of that. But yeah, Ben and Max King going up against each other, and now finally the Mackays, after 8 long years, we finally got them matched up against each other. They did actually play on each other for majority of the game, which was pretty fun to see. The scoreline, however, wasn't very good in terms of what Essendon would have liked. So it was 9-16-70 to 15-6-96. Carlton looking very, very strong coming out of it. Harry Mackay was subbed out pretty early on. I think it was like halfway through the game. He was pretty unlucky in terms of. I think it was more just not an injury concern, but he was just under a little bit of rough performance sort of thing. Kerno did most of the hard work anyway. So did Tom de Koning. 24 touches, 75% efficiency, 17 contested possessions, 5 marks, 7 inside 50s, 19 hitouts, 11 clearances, 4 score involvements, and 11 pressure acts. He was incredible.
Actually, sorry, I just remembered.
Go on.
Harry Mackay, he got knocked out by his brother. That was Ben. He hit him.
Yeah, with the.
And then it panned to his mum, and it was just like, I don't want to be doing that.
I bet they had a interesting conversation after the game about that.
It was weird. It was like pure gentle because it technically wasn't Ben. Like someone pushed Ben, who then went into Harry. I think it was like...
I want to know what actually happened down in the rooms after the game. Do the parents split off and go one to each room, or do they both go into one room?
Know. They had the dual scarf, so... as I said, I think you just... honestly, like, they seem pretty chill. Like, they were on the podcast together.
Yeah, they do have a podcast together.
They have
it's pretty
podcast.
Cool.
So as I said, it's one of those nice rivalries where it's like, they don't hate each other. So it's like very easy to go for them as a neutral. But yeah, it's still like quite a spectacle to see.
Yeah, they're not brothers that have massive rivalries against each other, despite playing opposing roles. So it's like, it's pretty cool that we actually finally got to see them match up on each other. But it's good to know that outside of the game, like they're very close, they're very fun.
Yeah, exactly.
Sam Walsh. I should go back to the game. Sam Walsh had a brilliant game. 22 touches, 13 contested possessions, 4 marks, 3 clearances, 7 score involvements, 6 tackles, 26 pressure acts, and a lonely behind. Not many goals actually came out of the midfield this time around. I think a lot of it was actually their strong forward presence for Carlton. Zach Williams, I know, had a really brilliant game.
It's like that new position, like one of the big ones, obviously, Elijah Hollins. Like, not quite a wing, not quite a half forward. Like, just sort of rotating. Oh, there's a lot of weird wing positions. Like, there's one that's like... I don't want to go too much of a tangent, but there's, like, players that, like, exist purely either on the 50 arc or the forward 50 arc, but nothing in the center. Yeah. So it's, like, everything but the wing.
Pretty much.
Which is, like, my favorite non-position.
One interesting thing...
Elijah Hollins.
One interesting thing I saw about this game... is that both captains, Merritt and Cripps, both got tagged and both were kept quiet throughout the entire game, which is really interesting because it's like Carlton have a lot of key players that do a lot of the hard work. Like, it's not just Cripps. Like, you've got Walsh, you've got Williams, players like that. For Essendon, it's mostly only Merritt that does the heavy lifting, and then occasionally you'll have other players
Yeah.
that'll like push up.
And by
push
heavy
in.
lift, like it's not like others don't work, but it's more
He's the one
it's
that
very
stands out the
differentiated
most.
role.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like Merritt's doing the chains that leads to goals, all that sort of stuff. And to be honest, I didn't think he had a bad game. Like
no. He was kept
doing
quiet, but it wasn't a bad game for him.
Yeah, exactly. Like he continued to tackle very well. He continued to dish out, provide clearances. It was just repressed. Shout out to Alex Chincotta. He is one of the best taggers in the league right now.
Absolutely.
Amazingly kicked 2 goals as well.
Love to see it.
Yeah, it was quite the performance. And yeah, Carlton just have a range of players that will either shut down, but can also just play on their own. George Hewitt's another one that can take that role. And not in this game specifically, just in general. And Matthew Kennedy.
Yep.
Here's another one. He's the more offensive tagger. But he likes taking the halfbacks and mitigating them and trying to kick some goals while he does that. So,
yeah, he likes playing out in front and in a tagging role, not necessarily like behind holding them back, which is a pretty interesting way to play, and I do like it. But because it's more of that offensive type of style.
Yeah, and his versatility as well.
Yeah, absolutely. A quick shout out to Jacob Wiedering as well. Like his numbers weren't really all that prevalent. Like 13 touches, 6 contested, 7 intercepts, 6 marks, 100% time on ground. Didn't touch the bench, but he was winning a lot of his one-on-ones. Like he was making sure that there was always a contest, and that's being a tall defender, that's what you want to see. And it's good.
Yeah.
He is a veteran, getting on, but he's putting up a lot of hard work, and it's something that Carlton has really loved since he came back from injury.
Yeah, exactly. And he was sort of playing like not pure, like it's a bit hybrid. When they like pick up the ruckman, but they also sort of float spare man, and they just drift in and out depending on impact.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's still got a fair few intercepts. Kept right, pretty quiet.
Well,
considering he was up forward.
Considering 2 meter Peter had 0 marks for the entire game.
Yeah, as pointed out by one of our good Essendon supporters, pretty on the nose for that. Yeah, no, it was a pretty good defensive performance. Pretty much overall, it was pretty good. Like, it was weird. Like in Essendon could generate a lot. Like 9-16 to 15-6. Like it's not scoring shots. It was fine, but it wasn't so much Essendon always missing. It's just Essendon would deny what they like, and their backup options weren't going for them. Like I'll let you go through the players a bit more, but yeah, as I said, as impressive Carlton were a bit stat wise, it was also some of the stuff around the field that I thought was very impressive.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And again, like I'm gonna quickly touch on Essendon because I think, despite what the scoreline looks like, I think their backline did actually have a pretty decent game. Jordan Ridley, specifically, I thought he was very, very good, very, very strong defensively. 22 touches at 95.5% efficiency, 10 intercept possessions, 9 marks. I thought young Archie Perkins, a player who has usually actually kept quite quiet because players, like Merritt, stand up quite a lot, usually take a lot of the spotlight. I thought he had a really, really strong game. 21 touches, 5 contested possessions, 5 intercept possessions, 8 inside 50s, 3 clearances, 8 score involvements, 5 tackles, and 416 meters gained. One of the top runners in the game. And yeah, like, again, we have talked about this in the past, especially about Essendon. It's like they're beating a lot of the the weaker teams. Some of them are close, like the Adelaide game. Some of them are blowouts, but they still haven't convincingly beaten a strong top 8 team, and that's a big concern for them at the moment.
Like, honestly, I think this is just a game again that's just a bit more reflective of where Essendon's actually at.
Like they might be sitting top 4, which is still really, really weird for them. But it's like they probably more belong towards bottom of the top 8, like 6, 7, 8 sort of position.
Honestly, though, I don't think it's as concerning as some people might make it out to be, though.
No,
Like,
like if they make
Carlton
finals,
went into
that's
this game,
incredible for them.
yeah,
But that's not kind
but
of what the whole scope is.
Yeah, Carlton went into this game like with an intent effort to try and restrict Essendon, try and limit some of their inside ball movement, especially, and also they just dominated the ground. Like Essendon's mosquito fleet, so to speak, has dropped off in the last few games. Unfortunately, this wasn't like the best for them, um, you know, but they did. Carlton were not lucky, but they did still rely on Essendon not taking a few of their chances. You know what I mean? Like, it's not that this game should have been closer because I think Carlton deserved to win.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, it's like Essendon could still get ball movement. They could still get, their hands on the ball. It wasn't like they were pathetic or anything. In fact, I think some of their pressure efforts were quite good for most of the match. It was just ineffectual, but I think you could probably put that down as just learning curve and figuring out how to win against top teams. As I said, they can't really control the people that they've versed and the sort of form that they've been in. And when you've been a team like Essendon where you've just been finding ways to win, and then all of a sudden you have a game where it doesn't work, as it clearly did, especially going inside 50. Like there was a fair amount of turnovers for Essendon, but it wasn't. It was only a 26-point margin. If scores were a bit more even, and technically Essendon, if you go on my favorite X scores, which is shots, compared to what you should have gotten, that most teams get, are from that same position. Essendon should have scored 100 points to Carlton's 84. So you know what I mean? Like, it was dominant by Carlton, and I have a lot of respect for them. I think
similar
this game
to the West Coast situation where it's just slightly inaccurate, and it's just because Essendon did a lot of the hard work to be able to get
Essendon were a bit better than West Coast. I know what you're saying, but
it's not reflective. Like they did a lot of the hard work in the midfield to get those forward entries, to get those opportunities to score, but there's just no lack of conversion.
Yeah, exactly. But you know what I mean? It's like Carlton tried their best to deny it. And like other wins, as said, Brisbane against the Western Bulldogs, Sydney against Geelong. I think the difference between those games and the ones, that Essendon had was, they were still willing to try and, they still had the structure to try and break through. And, they did with very varied success rate. But you know what I mean? It just didn't happen for them. But, while they'd be upset with the loss, I don't think it's actually the worst thing for them. No. I wouldn't think that this is like, Essendon are a bunch of pretenders. They'll drop out. I mean, they probably will, but you know what I mean? I don't think it's not that I think football.
It's not that I think
they're not the best. Yeah, it's just they're not the best, but there's a lot of things going right for them. And I think that just could be lost by the fact that they're, in third when they probably aren't a third.
They're probably more
team,
like 6 to 8 sort of position.
Exactly. But they're a solid 6 to 8, and they've got a lot of good things going, especially forward of the ball.
Yeah.
And defense is coming together. And
you look at it like just in terms of a long-term scope. Like if they make top 8 at the end of the season and then go out straight away, I still think that's considered a success because they made finals. Sure, they didn't win a final, and that streak will still go. But they've shown over the past couple of years, they've shown that they can do it. They just they're still working on some pieces. It's only Scott's second year coaching this team.
I think so. Yeah.
So he's still trying to work with what he's got. It's still early days for him in terms of working with the team. Yeah, it's not like it was a list
that either of us were that impressed with going into the year.
No,
we thought there were holes.
And some of the holes have been filled. Granted, some of them are also injured at the moment. Dersma being one of them. But they've shown that they can put up strong fights even against the top 8 teams. It's just about conversion and just about being a little bit more consistent in shutting down the stronger parts of the top 8 teams. Sort of.
Yeah, exactly. Structure. Like they're a bit one note, but it's not through lack of effort. Like, it's efforts around the ground or anything like that. It's just, as a young team.
Yeah, exactly right.
More impressive than the second best, which, you just get. So I'll work on that. They'll improve hopefully next year. And, I think that's where Essendon might play their best football. Their age profile is fantastic. But yeah, as I said, I would still be optimistic of what they can do this year. I wouldn't write them off yet, but yeah, they're not top 4. Like, let's be clear. Like, no. But honestly,
and I think every Essendon supporter,
which I say, and
kind of gets that.
Sort of knows. Yeah.
Yeah. Just to quickly cap that off. Only one injury in that game to Will Setterfield. We did briefly talk about it before. It was a knee injury, which is very unlucky. I don't think it was an ACL, but I haven't actually had a look. So hopefully he's okay. But otherwise, yeah. And that's it for the round so far, because the other game's still playing, although at this point we may as well talk about it now. Melbourne are kicking goals in junk time, but I don't think they're going to get a win out of this. It's just...
No, it's been another Melbourne game where they haven't converted inside 50.
I did bring the stats up, if you want to just go through it now at this point.
Yeah, sure.
So I don't know what the final margin's going to be. Probably going to be similar to what it looks like at the moment. 30-ish points. Josh Dacos, it looks like, has had another standout performance. 31 touches, 10 contested possessions, 10 marks, 5 inside 50s, 6 clearances, 4 score involvements, 3 tackles. Jack Crisp looks like has had another strong midfield game. 26 touches, 11 contested possessions, 4 marks, 8 inside 50s, 6 clearances, 4 score involvements, 4 tackles. I don't have any pressure act notes here. I think they're usually tallied up at the end of the game. John Noble has had a really, really strong impact this week. That's good to see. Jeremy Howe has another good game off half back. A lot of Collingwood's veterans look like have really stood up this week. Steel Sidebottom,
my boy Harvey Harrison,
really good notable one. Nick Dacos looks like he was tagged. He's been a little bit quiet. Nothing bad about that, but it's probably the first time in a while he's been kept really, really quiet. Unless he was subbed out. I don't actually know.
Yeah, it's subbed out with injury. Limping off, favouring his right leg after a shin knock.
Do you know what quarter that was?
Quarter 4, but subbed off for Bytel.
Quarter 4. Okay, that's not too bad. So he probably was tagged.
So yeah, he came on. Is just like resting. At this point, it's probably a precautionary. But yeah, just had a solid game, I'm guessing.
Stats look really good for Hoskin Elliott. I think this is his first game back from injury. 13 touches, 6 contested possessions, 2-1 scoreline at the moment. For Melbourne, Jacob Van Rooyen has looked really good. Looks like it. 9 marks, 3-1 scoreline, 5 contested possessions, 13 touches.
The only Melbourne player with a positive goal kicking.
Yeah, that's not surprising. Max Gawn, another strong ruck performance, 25 touches, 14 contested possessions, 7 intercepts, 9 marks, 43 hitouts. He did actually have scoreboard impact, but it was only a behind. Trent Rivers looks like he's had a good game as well. I do actually really like Rivers. I know we haven't really touched much on like some of their more...
Yeah, it's one of those week in, week out players that, just perform well each week.
Yeah.
But yeah, this one...
But
it
looks like...
one of those halfback performances where it's like, the ball seems to be living down there.
Yeah.
But he hasn't been using it too badly once he's had it. So.
I still think the argument that I made last week kind of holds true, and it's that their backline really, really struggles without Jake Lever.
Yeah, no.
Again, like, they should be a lot stronger against it. Or granted, their lack of conversion, again, 6-14 is not very pretty. If you flip that around, they would be in front by 1 point. But
yeah. 14-5 is pretty damn good for
that's very accurate.
ragtag bunch of individuals. Like, this is not the team you would pick if you were trying to get the best forward line in the
they're still
competition.
missing Elliot, they're still missing DeGoey, they're still missing quite a few of their like stronger goal kicking players. But they're still missing Maracek as well, aren't they? So
Maracek's not playing.
So they're like still missing...
none of them you would pick in like a best. Like
Hoskin Elliott's probably
Nathan
like
Krieger,
the only one as
Harvey
well.
Harrison.
And Harvey Harrison's been a really good standout for them, to be fair.
I love him.
Young player.
Honestly.
Very good.
Cheeky rising star. I know he hasn't played early.
He hasn't played enough
really
games
good.
yet to really get enough votes, but he definitely has been a standout.
He's playing this way, though.
Oh, yeah. No, later half of the season could make a very massive impact.
Okay. And it seems like Petrarca might have a few rib issues. He was subbed off for Melbourne.
Okay.
Tremendous pain, knee to the ribs. Ooh. Got a jab to return in quarter 2, but couldn't play out in the match. So this might be sort of thing that you look at hospital, get a scan, and the game's just finished. 89, 14-5, 89.
9 to 16,
6-15, 51.
6-15, 51.
I remember to do the score.
I don't. I have the entire thing on the screen for the YouTube format, but for the Spotify audio, there you go. It's again. I think Collingwood aren't even at their full strength, and Melbourne are meant to be a strong top 8 side, but clearly they have an issue with conversion, and they're also missing clearly their one key defensive player that actually is the glue to keeping them together.
Yeah, as I said, they're a team that can't afford to be defensively bad. Just like Collingwood were at the start of the season. Like
this kind of sucks for us because
actually
we both tip Melbourne, so our tip scores don't change this week either.
Yeah. So as I said, it is just like so mirrored. Like Collingwood, defensively shambles early, sort of find out the way.
Mm-hmm.
Melbourne, we're doing enough forward to make up for it, and have just sort of fallen off by the wayside. It'll be interesting to see if they make the top 8. Like, they could stay out of the finals, really.
At this rate,
have to return back in.
At this rate, there is a very possible chance that they will not make finals, which is weird because they've consistently been making finals the past couple of years, including winning a premiership.
So, as I said, it is what it is.
They have good parts. Like, I do really like Turner. I think he's been a really bright star for them. Veteran Jack Viney, I think, has been putting up some decent performances. Clayton Oliver had a really, really strong game, it looks like, going off the stats.
Yeah, but Viney did have a bit of a knock this match, which apparently affected his performance. A bit banged up, it seems, Melbourne.
Well, Viney gets a lot of that, to be fair. Like, he is a very strong on-baller kind of player, but, is what it is.
Not great for your body.
No, especially when you're a veteran. But it's definitely their defensive issues is what's causing them a lot of pain.
All right. Do you want to wrap up the? Do you want to go on to next week's game?
Let me just go through the ladder as we normally do. This is what the ladder's looking like this week. I can actually zoom back in now that I don't have to look at the other thing. So here's what we're looking at. Sydney's still sitting clean on top, 2 games in front. If you're a Sydney fan, it's what you love to see. You're probably going to be staying up there for a while longer, especially next week because you're playing the Adelaide Crows. Carlton jumped up to 2nd. Essendon dropped down to 3rd. Only half a game separating them. Only half a game separating Essendon from Port and Geelong, with Geelong dropping down to 5th. There's only half a game separating Port and Geelong from Fremantle at 6th. Because of all these draws. Like, there's been some really funny draws throughout this season so far.
Well, the biggest impact of this week, and last week, of course, but Fremantle will now overtake Essendon fairly comfortably in terms of percentage. So, if they get more wins than Essendon, if they tie with Essendon, they should pretty much be above them on the ladder.
I'm just going to quickly refresh the page because I don't think it's actually... No, it hasn't updated yet in terms of the game that just finished. But Collingwood will have actually jumped into 6th place. I I don't know how much percentage they will actually get from this game. They might actually jump to 5th.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, they're probably 5th now.
which is pretty interesting. So they go up to 32 for audio listeners. They go up to 32 points. They might gain. I don't know how much percentage. They might gain 4.3% to jump Geelong, but if not, they will go to 6th, just below Geelong, which will drop Fremantle to 7th, GWS to 8th, the Suns to 9th, and Melbourne to 10th. Then you'll have.
Okay, they're just below Collingwood by point. They're just below
Geelong.
Geelong by 0.9%.
Okay.
So they're 6th.
So they jump to 6th.
So Geelong 5th, Collingwood 6th.
Fremantle is now at 7th. The Giants at 8th. The Suns at 9th. Melbourne stay 10th. The Doggies and Hawthorn on 24 points at 11th and 12th. Brisbane are currently at 13th with 22 points. St Kilda jump up to 14th position with 20 points. And then to round out the bottom 4, with Adelaide on 18 points, the Eagles on 12 points, Richmond on 8 points, and North Melbourne officially on 4 points.
Happy Roo noises.
I mean, got to take the wins while you can, especially when your percentage is only at 58.6.
Yeah.
To be fair, ours is at 64.9, so I cannot say anything. One interesting thing that I did actually just spot, though, Essendon are nearly back to below 100 percentage. They're at 100.2.
Yeah, no, they were. I was like, they can get they're under 100% back to 2nd, but obviously losing to Carlton drops them to 3rd. But yeah,
and then
it's going to be.
If you look at 12th to if you look at 7th to 18th. Brisbane at 30th position have the highest percentage at 115. I would say higher than that because Geelong, Port Adelaide, Essendon, and Carlton all have lower percentage than Brisbane, but Fremantle have higher percentage than them. So if you go on percentage alone, Sydney, Fremantle, and Brisbane would actually be top 3, which is kind of crazy.
I mean, I don't really believe it, but
no. Not if you look at performance, there's absolutely no way, and that's what the ladder reflects. But if you look at percentage, that is weird.
It's just Brisbane really like the game going towards them, but otherwise they have a pretty mediocre defense.
Yeah, because a lot of the games that Brisbane have lost have been close losses, and a lot of the games that they've won have been blowouts, which is why.
Fremantle's just sort of the team where they've just been fluctuating offensively, but otherwise tend to have good control of the game each week.
Mm-hmm.
And I've already forgotten. Sydney. Sydney. They're actually good.
Yeah, they've
Fremantle are good.
Sydney have only lost one game of the season, and guess who that was too?
Richmond.
We will take that and run with it. Okay. Moving on to the next round 14. Sorry, I didn't mean to bring that one up or that one. We'll talk about that in a sec. Round 14.
Yeah, no more Thursday games.
No more Thursday night games.
Interested, yeah.
Some things are still saying, I know some TV shows are still saying on this time slots that they would have so it normally doesn't affect footy, like the Front Bar, a show that I regularly watch. Normally they go to Thursdays if there's no footy on Thursdays, but they're staying Wednesday nights just for kind of an example. But let's talk about the games for this upcoming week with Brisbane and St Kilda at the Gabba. I think kind of self-explanatory. Yeah.
Honestly, they could put a contender for the worst game of the season if Brisbane are inaccurate, like sometimes are, and St Kilda are. But yeah, St Kilda. Look, their inside midfield has been better the last 2 weeks.
It has,
which is what I've been saying week in, week out. Which obviously, if it's not, they're just going to get absolutely slaughtered by Brisbane. There's no doubt in my mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
That they will just keep the ball locked in their forward half. They might not score that easily, but in terms of possession, they would clearly dominate there. In terms of St Kilda avenue for winning, I think it's generating off turnovers in the defensive half. If they can move the ball from the back half to forward half, convert, obviously, when they do that. They might expose Brisbane. Otherwise, yeah, it's a pretty clear win from Brisbane.
Yeah, I agree. Doggies and Freo at Marvel Stadium. Again, Fremantle coming off of a bye this week. Having to travel straight away. I don't know what sort of injuries
Second
they'll get
showing.
back. You probably...
Fremantle? It's really just maybe Brandon Cox.
Okay.
Yeah, they're pretty much... I mean, they've got a pretty clean... Like, their injury list was bad at the start, but sort of evened out.
Yeah, I think they picked up.
now.
I think, honestly, even though Freo at the moment are kind of rated as the underdogs going into this, I think overall, they'll probably put up a better performance. It'll just be whether the curse of the bye gets them.
I don't know, as I said. Yeah, man. I try not to believe too much of that, especially when tipping. I prefer to go off form, but it does make a difference.
Yeah.
But it's just so hard when Fremantle, again, like theoretically, they're one of the teams that Bulldogs should hate. They've already beaten the Bulldogs already.
Mm-hmm.
And I said they are fairly restricting in terms of outside ball movement. They defend clearances very well, which again, Bulldogs should hate. But there's always that niggling feeling in the back of your head. Like, if Fremantle don't convert... I mean, look, they may even keep the ball. Yeah, I'm tipping Freo. I just think...
I'm definitely leaning Freo on that one.
Of all... I mean, I can see them losing, but, like, on paper, it's just not a good matchup for the Bulldogs.
No.
And especially defensively, now that they've lost a key couple of defenders. Fremantle play pretty tall with Tracy and... Kahuna.
You also have Amos who can actually reach pretty tall as well.
Amos. Yeah. Yeah. And who knows, maybe we'll get Matt Taverner as well. Cheeky.
Matt Taverner back would actually be huge.
No, I was joking.
I like Taverner. Give me credit.
Yeah, he's past it though. His form was underrated when he was good, but I mean he's just past now.
Yeah, okay,
it was a very small window.
That's fair enough. Okay, to be honest, I thought this game was a Sunday game. But now that I know it's a Saturday game, it kind of makes it more exciting. Richmond and Hawthorn in the MCG. Dustin Martin's 300th game. Richmond looking...
Two form teams of the competition.
Richmond getting a win on the road, heading home, and wanting to try and keep that sort of momentum going against the Hawks, who are currently on a pretty solid win streak. Very, very much in form. Very, very strong midfield roles now that they've finally established what they like, how they want to play.
It's one of those things where if you're like technically, if you took Richmond's inside midfield and Hawthorn's outside, you'd probably get one of the best midfield.
I agree. Actually, that's
you know what I mean. Like there'll be like a super team. Or at least in the top 8.
It'd be a really interesting amalgamation, that's for sure.
Yeah.
There are inklings that we may get Tom Lynch back in this week, which is good because we'll finally have a forward line.
Or just a forward full stop.
Yeah, so that'll be nice to see. Yeah, we didn't suffer any major injuries last week, so we should be all good in terms of that. It'll just be probably Lynch in. Maybe I don't think any of our players massively underperformed, so it shouldn't be. It won't be like a massive switch in, switch out. I do think someone will definitely have to come out for Dusty and for Lynch.
Probably
obviously.
Still Kazitsky.
I would assume Kazitsky would come out for Lynch.
Yeah. Not off a terrible game though.
No. Yeah. My assumption off the top of my head will probably be, as our 3 main forward, our main talls will be Nankervis, Lynch, and Samson Ryan in terms of rotating sort of forward positions. And then obviously we'll have Bolter down the back.
And if you're talking about like avenues for Richmond winning, I think that's a clear advantage for them.
Mm-hmm. We'll have
not so much,
Bolton, Baker in the midfield, Short coming off of half back.
Yeah.
McIntosh on the wing. Ruck contest.
If Meek isn't back,
if Meek isn't back, it's the Nankervis domination.
But yeah, like, I don't know. I'm going to respect Hawthorn and just tip them. There might be some team sheets that make me switch my vote.
For this one, I'm definitely going with my heart. The win last week against Adelaide. The win this week against Adelaide. That was actually just pure like guesswork. That was not a heart tip. That was a brain tip. But this week I'm definitely going with the heart. I have to. But I think, I'll be honest, if you're looking at this on paper, go with the Hawks. Like, have faith. They look really good. They're very much in form. Kind of trust their process. But if you want to follow me. I will also take that.
I don't know. I think it's not much though, other than 60-40, but I wouldn't say there's that much difference between
No, I
the
definitely
two
think
teams.
I definitely think it could be closer, or just close in general.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we only got 6 games this week. Excellent.
Yeah.
Much easier to cover. Adelaide and Sydney at the Adelaide Oval. Sydney, by far. I don't think anyone can kind of contest that. Don't have to go too far much into it.
I can't even think of a positive for Adelaide because, like, I mentioned before, with like the midfield shutdown,
their midfield struggling. They just don't have the units. They don't have a forward line. Their backline's still decent, but I don't think it's going to be enough to shut down Sydney.
Sydney haven't cared about good backlines this year.
No, exactly.
That's not disrespectful for Adelaide. That's just facts. So Sydney,
North Melbourne, and Collingwood at Marvel Stadium. On form, you'd probably just go Collingwood on that one.
With Collingwood, I mean,
as much as you want to give North some credit, actually,
I wish it was a slightly better.
I know I didn't shout him out.
Slightly better game after the win.
I know I didn't shout him out in the game they just played over at Optus, but Tristan Xerri had another great game. I'm very strong midfielder, very, very good for North.
But again, be a good battle for him.
It will, Darcy Cameron. I agree.
But we'll require him to play a complete game around the ground. Cherry has seen to do that. He's a bit better, just purely.
Yeah.
He's useful.
Absolutely. But you probably just give the edge to Collingwood on that one, just based on track record.
Quite massively, I would say.
And then
Collingwood have been fantastic despite their injuries.
Probably the only other game of the round, actually probably the only game of the round, I'm going to be honest, is GWS and Port Adelaide.
Yeah, Bulldogs Free might be. And Richmond all of them, but it's not anything that I'd expect to be that close this round and or maybe interesting.
You want the Giants to definitely have a stronger performance after what they had.
Oh no, I'll take a Port thrashing. It's I very much expect that the Giants midfield will want to come out firing. As I said, been a bit quiet the last month. Port, as I said, forward line, they need to get going a bit more. Defensively, as I said, they struggle small, so Toby Green becomes a massive threat. So, there's pain bits for both sides, and especially away. I'm not going to tell you to tip Port, but I mean, I still believe in them, but I mean, I'm a Port supporter.
Yeah.
I'm an optimistic one at that. Fight cause
you have
bodily harm to him.
You have
I'll probably even say hello.
Pretty solid performances so far this season. It's why you're 4th. But you do still have a lot of issues.
Yeah, we're not atrocious. It's just deficiencies. But yeah, so we've seen a lot of teams with deficiencies. We're not the first, won't be the last.
Yeah.
Sydney are the complete team in my mind. Although I do respect Carlton. I think they're turning into a more complete side as
absolutely.
time goes on. They obviously had the bye this week. But I'll give
go
the
Giants on that one.
You give Blaze. If you want to go counter.
I'm aiming for 6 out of 6 this week, in case you haven't noticed.
Oh, I never aim for 6 out of 6. I aim for 3. Temper the expectations.
Hey, I'm still trying to catch up here. Especially my work comp. There's money involved. But yeah.
Are you overtaking me now?
Yes, I'm in front of you by 1.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
Because I tipped Richmond and you didn't.
Yeah. And for the audio listeners, do you have the bye teams?
I do. I got them. So it's the Suns, Carlton, Geelong, Essendon, Melbourne, and the West Coast Eagles all have the bye this week.
Yep.
Which, for some teams, deserved, and for other teams, very much needed. Carlton, probably a deserved bye, even though they're actually on a pretty decent streak at the moment. Gold Coast Suns, probably kind of the same thing. They've been putting up decent performances, but I think the teams just need a rest.
Yeah, they might need to restructure a bit.
And then, Geelong,
overall
Essendon,
fine.
Melbourne especially,
Indeed.
and the West Coast Eagles. They need this break badly.
I'd put Essendon in like a bit above that. Like, I don't think their form's been that bad, but
No,
back
but
to back
like,
losses.
they definitely need a break.
If they still want to aim for top 4, they can't have too many back-to-back losses.
No,
especially when they were both fairly gettable. Especially with conversion, they could have been got at least one of them, but it didn't happen.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
It is what it is.
And then just to wind us down, so as everyone knows, like Channel 7 does get a lot of exclusivity rights with the AFL. Big Freeze is no exception, especially the sliders aspect. I didn't get to see any of the sliders until this article. So I want to just kind of run through them and just kind of, admire how all of the sliders looked. And for any audio listeners, just describe what they look like.
We'll appeal to the younger demographic. We'll give them a Riz rating.
I don't know if I want to do that. But anyway, so we'll start at the top. Nick Nat Nui. It's always good to see him doing something AFL related. Love the man. He's dressed up as a Jamaican bobsledder probably specifically from Cool Runnings. They kind of also rated him just as Bob Marley because of the dreadlocks. That's a little unfair, I guess. Kind of stereotypical of the AFL and Channel 7.
Yeah,
whatever.
I was a bit surprised actually. Like, that's clearly Cool Runnings, but I bet maybe he did a bit of a Bob Marley impression before. I didn't see it. So.
No, neither did I. But I rate it.
Let's just face it. Nick Nat's just a natural 10 on the Riz factor. So
Absolutely.
It's a simple a simple costume, but it's Nick Nat. You got to give him a perfect.
All right, Sally Pearson as Madonna. Very accurate into what Madonna would wear.
Yeah.
I see no issues with it.
I haven't seen Sally Pearson in years. Like, she's the hurdler, wasn't she?
Yes. I can't remember.
Yeah. Olympian, anyway.
She was an Olympian. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Olympics aren't my forte. But yeah, that's Madonna.
Still,
a bit before Blaze's era. Yeah, like, I think Blaze probably knew a more different side of Madonna.
I'm very familiar with all aspects of Madonna. It doesn't mean I'm that involved in her works, but
fair enough.
I've seen it all.
Fair enough.
I rate it. James Brayshaw as Axl Rose. Even got the fake sleeve tats and everything.
Yeah.
Pretty kind of
solid effort.
Kind of generic, but a solid effort nonetheless.
Yeah.
6 out of 10.
Yeah.
Meg Lanning as Tina Turner. I'm a big
a goat dressing up as a goat.
Yeah, exactly right. I'm also a big Fishnets fan, so this immediately gets a 10 for me. So yeah, that's Meg Lanning as Tina Turner. Love to see it. Joel Selwood as a generic pink outfit man, Robbie Williams.
Yeah. Look, it's not like the most.
It's the outfit that he wore to
you recognize it when you see it, but I mean,
it's the outfit that he wore for the 2022 grand final.
Oh, that makes sense then.
So more iconic for Selwood, at least.
Yeah.
I don't rate Selwood all that highly. Never really will, so I give that a 5.
I rate him as a player. As a personality, though, he doesn't. I don't think he matches Robbie Williams' energy.
No. Mac Horton, former Olympic swimmer, dressed as Peter Garrett from Midnight Oil, bald cap and everything. Kind of pretty generic, but I also rate it.
Yeah, he tried the Garrett moves. Like, I feel like he's someone that's just like listened to his parents' cassettes and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's it's what you kind of expect. It's nothing
about him, which is nice.
Maybe 6 out of
10. One that you like, probably. Riz, I don't know.
Jack.
I don't want to get too political, but after his stint in Labour, I don't think Peter Garrett gets much Riz for me, but I appreciate him as a singer.
Jack Rewalt as Brandon Flowers from Killers. I don't think anyone is surprised at all that this is where he was going to end up.
Yeah.
I give it a solid 9 out of 10. I think he looks the part.
I give it an 8. As I said, that wig's fantastic.
That wig is
it's not
fantastic.
Exactly Brandon Flowers for me.
It's the similar hairstyle that he had when he was here in 70. So
Yeah, maybe.
fairly.
He's not eyeliner. I said this before the stream.
Yeah, that's true. You did.
You can't go pop rock without any eyeliner.
Yeah, I agree. I think Jack's just not a big makeup fan, but it's just, is what it is. I see you shaking your head.
Honestly, yeah.
And then probably
you got to take glam rock seriously.
Probably a strong 10 out of 10 look.
Oh, 100%.
Speaking of glam rock,
best for the night.
Aaron Phillips is pink.
Oh, fantastic!
Absolutely
great
stunning.
Outfit.
Very accurate.
And again, it's like someone that you can like in terms of like energy matchup.
Yeah, it's
probably like I don't associate energy like Aaron Phillips always being that, but she can be, and it brings out that side of her.
And whilst
someone that I very much admire.
And whilst you may not really hear that energy very much on broadcast, like when she's allowed to talk passionately about stuff that she really loves, like when she's talking about AFLW stuff, for example.
Oh yeah,
it's a lot of high energy and a lot of passion
stuff as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think she's just like finding her feet in terms of traditional broadcasts, like especially when you can't exactly go ham on your first year. You know what I mean? So, but yeah, love to see it. Great costume. Yeah,
absolutely.
10 out of 10 hair too.
And then to round it all off, Pat Rafter, legendary tennis player, as Brian Johnson from AC/DC. Again, probably a little bit basic in terms of the actual outfit itself, but he's got the hat, and the hat is all you really need. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously, actually, I don't know if Brian Johnson was WA. I don't think he was, but maybe it's a bit controversial where you count AC/DC as coming from, depending on the members. But I
still rate it.
WA.
I still rate it. No issues.
Yeah, no, it's good. All
right,
medium riz. Got that dad riz. That's a different sort of riz.
That's dad riz right there.
Yeah.
All right, I believe that will do it for us this week. Looking forward to the shorter weeks coming up with the buys.
Yeah.
Very, very excited to get to try and talk about a little bit more different stuff rather than just the games. Like maybe we see some interesting articles similar to what we saw the other week. Talk about something that's more in terms of the AFL as a whole rather than just specific rounds and things like that.
Yeah, for sure. I'm keen to talk about anything.
I'm sure we'll find something to fill the gaps if we need to. But yeah, thank you all so much for hanging out with us this week. Be sure to go check out socials as per normal, especially mine. I'm doing some more streams on Twitch a little bit more often. So definitely trying to find some more enjoyment and a lot more fun in that. I've been really, really enjoying the ones that I did recently, especially since coming back from Canada. It's been a good time. Next week, again, shorter weeks, only 6 games to cover. I will be at one of them, which, Dusty's 300th. I'm not going to miss that for the world. Absolutely not. So we'll be sure to report in on how fun it was, win or lose.
Exactly.
Be sure to look forward to that. Yeah. And thank you all so much. And we will see you all next week. Goodbye.